careful, Chris. And we'll have our clerk, Christian Sampson, who, by the way, has just been elected as the president of the Town Clerks Association for the entire state of New York. There are 932 towns, and he is... And your reign actually started July 1st, didn't it?
July 1st, yes.
Okay, so congratulations, and you make us proud.
And thank you. Councilman Ullman.
Here.
Councilman Friedman.
Here.
Councilwoman Logan.
Here.
Councilman Deputy Supervisor Withers.
Present.
Supervisor St. Lawrence.
Here, I'd like to ask Councilman Ullman to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first order on our business is going to be a public hearing, and before I have Michael Speck read into the record the publications, I just want to let everybody know what the ground rules are. I'll call off the names of the people that have already signed up. You can come up, you can speak for as long as you want. It's a public hearing. If you want to speak for an hour, God bless you, but we would hope that you would focus remarks, and you can speak for as long as you want. There's no time frame. If you are then sit down and think you forgot something, you'll be able to speak again after everybody else has spoken. If you want to then speak again about another something, then you just raise your hand again so you could speak again. So we want everybody to be able to speak their mind and their concerns. And what we'll do is we will read into the record the notifications for the public hearing. We'll have Mr. Emanuel, the attorney for this applicant, to speak about the project and with his professionals here. And then we'll open it up to the public. And the board will be able to answer questions as well. And that's where we are. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. All right. So, Michael, do we have all the proper publication for this?
We do. We have the affidavit of publication, the affidavit of posting, and an affidavit from the petitioner of mailing and posting. So, therefore, we have all the legal prerequisites for the public hearing to go forward, Supervisor.
Okay. So at this time, we'll ask Mr. Emanuel to come up and to tell us...
Mr. Supervisor, before we do that, if I could just read it to the record, the notice of the hearing and the list of exhibits.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. Notice of public hearing. Notice is hereby given by the Town Board of the Town of Ramapo that pursuant to the provisions of the Town Law of the State of New York, a public hearing will be held at 6 o'clock p.m. at the Ramapo Town Hall, 237 Route 59, Suffolk, New York, 10901, on the 10th day of July, 2013, to consider the adoption of a local law entitled a local law amending local law number 10-2004 zoning as amended to change the zoning map of the town of Ramapo, Temple Bethel, Viola Gardens, LLC. Notice is hereby further given that all interested persons will be given an opportunity to be heard. We also have some exhibits I'd like to read into the record the list. We have number 1 is the affidavit of publication in the Rockland County Times. Number 2 is the affidavit of posting. Number 3 is the affidavit of mailing and posting by the applicant. Number 4 is the petition with exhibits. Number 5 is the Rockland County Department of Highway letter dated March 18, 2013. Number 6 is the New York State Department of Transportation letter of March 19, 2013. Number 7 is Town Board Resolution 2013-240 adopting EAF Part 2. Number 8 is Rockland County Department of Health letter of March 28, 2013. Number 9 is Water Supply Report of L. Jackson Associates dated March 28, 2013. Number 10 is Rockland County Sewer District Number 1 letter of April 3, 2013. Number 11 is General Municipal Review letter of April 10, 2013 by the Rockland County Department of Planning. Number 12 is a letter from Mr. Emanuel dated June 14, 2013. Number 13 is the sketch subdivision plat dated March 28, 2013. Number 14 is the sanitary sewer capacity analysis of March 26, 2013. Number 15 is the Town of Ramapo Planning Board Memorandum of No Recommendation. Number 16 is the traffic report of Mazer Consulting dated May 28, 2013. And last, we have number 17 are letters that I've received tonight from neighbors. There's 18 letters signed by 18 different neighbors. The letters are all identical. I could, if the board wishes, I could read it into the record or provide copies to everybody.
Why don't you read the letter in that's signed by 18 people, and then we'll present those to the clerk and we'll make them part of the record.
Thank you. The letter is dated May 6, 2013, regarding Temple Bethel, Viola Gardens development to the Town of Ramapo Planning Board and Town Board. We would like to begin by saying that we recognize the need for additional housing units in the greater Muncie area. We also recognize the Temple's need to raise money by selling the unused portion of its land. Furthermore, we are not here to oppose the project. Rather, we are here to request that the town slightly modify the site plan to help mitigate the significant negative impacts that the project will have on us and on our neighborhood. The following are two minor modifications that will help reduce the adverse impact, yet at the same time will not reduce the density or character of the proposed development. First, we request that the town require a 70-foot rear buffer in addition to the required 35-foot rear setback. This is based on the language found in the Town of Ramapo's bulk table requirements for MR8 zoning, which states that a buffer with a minimum dimension of the respective required setback may be required as a condition of an approval of any site plan where such use may adversely affect the character of the neighborhood. Second, we request that the town limit the height of the 6 units closest to the rear buffer to 2 stories. We believe that a compromise such as the above is the best and quickest way to mitigate the negative impacts that the proposed development will have on our neighborhood. Ideally, we would like this land to remain zoned as is, as R25, and ideally, the Temple would like the site plan to be approved as is. Thus, we are proposing this compromise so this project can move forward quickly without delay. I'll provide that to the town clerk at this time. You put copies in there? Thank you. Can we get copies? We could, yeah, we'll do that.
You'll make a copy for us?
Sure. Before the vote.
Yeah.
And then just the one final thing to put on the record before we start the hearing.
Okay.
Michael Klein, the town attorney, and Anthony Malio, the director of building, planning, and zoning, have had to recuse themselves from this hearing since they're both members of Temple Bethel to avoid any appearance of conflict. They've recused themselves.
Maybe I should recuse myself. I've been at the Temple Bethel since I was a little kid, so and we're very. This is a tough year for the Temple because of the passing of the rabbi, who was just an incredible person, and a person that led the way when it came to social justice and social injustices and identifying those. And so we're very sorry for his passing, and his memory. We will take that spirit and start the public hearing. Okay, Mr. Emanuel.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor, council members. Ira Emanuel, new city attorney for the applicant. Thank you also for coming out this evening. I know that this is an unusual time for the board to meet, and we appreciate the fact that you are here, as well as all the members of the public, whatever their response is to this application. As was stated, this is an application for a zone change for 5.5 acres of the Temple Bethel campus, which is directly opposite Ramapo High School on the south side of Viola Road. The property is currently zoned R25, as is the area around it, and it has been R25 for many, many years, probably decades, despite the fact that the area has changed significantly, especially within the past 10 years or so. One of the big changes that has occurred is that the area has become much more institutional in nature, especially along Viola Road. We have here posted for the public to see, and also there's a version of it in your packages, a land use map that was generated using information provided by the Rockland County Department of Planning, and also by updated with information that we've obtained from...
Any members want to walk around it?
Yeah, also information that we've obtained from the town's planning department. And where, for example, in 2004, your comprehensive plan showed all single-family homes all along Viola Road, starting from Route 306 up until the Temple property, that whole area now is filled with yeshivas. You have the large Or Sameach campus, which just received approval for a rather good-sized dormitory of 73 units. You also have next to that the girls' school, Beis Mikra Academy, neither of which were there when the comprehensive plan was first put out in 2004. In addition, a little bit further down the road, going towards Spring Valley, you have what is now Kakiat Elementary School. It was Kakiat Junior High School, then Kakiat Middle School, then Kakiat Freshman Center, and now is an elementary school. And immediately across is probably one of the oldest multifamily apartment complexes in the town of Ramapo, in the unincorporated town of Ramapo, Holland House, which has 40 units. So this is no longer a neighborhood which is comprised of single-family homes, especially along that Viola Road corridor. In addition, as the board well knows, Viola Road is a county road and a very wide county road, and certainly can handle a lot of traffic, and does in fact handle a lot of traffic. There's signalized intersections at both Union Road and Route 306, and it is capable of handling far more traffic than what this particular proposed development would generate. The particular 5.5 acres that we're talking about have been part of Temple Bethel's property for decades. They were held there, they were purchased there back in the heyday when Temple Bethel had 900 families and a waiting list. Temple Bethel is much smaller now, the land is surplus, and it's no secret that the temple has had some recent financial difficulties, which it is starting to come out of. And part of the reason why and the major reason why the temple is selling the property is to help it get out of its current financial difficulties. By the way, you were kind enough to mention Rabbi Frischman, who obviously was very near and dear to all of us there. As of July 1st, not only did the Town Clerks Association get a new president, we got a new rabbi. So Rabbi Michael Trugel is the new rabbi who is starting and taking over after Rabbi Mass, who served for 30 years at Temple Bethel. So just wanted to bring you up to date on that.
I can't believe it. Rabbi Moss has been there for 30 years. He doesn't look old enough to retire from anything.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. The density that we're proposing here at MR8 is, of course, 8 units per acre. And this is actually less than most of the other multifamily units that are surrounding the area. We mentioned Holland House before. That comes out to 11.5 units per acre. The Orsameach Dormitory, which is on a small portion, they actually took over some houses in order to get the approval, get the space for the dormitory. That comes out to 27 units per acre. Across Viola Road in New Hempstead, because that's the boundary line, their zoning is 2R. Is a zoning that allows 4.3 units per acre.
I don't mean to interrupt you,
Yeah.
and you break your case.
Sorry.
But you're right. If you look on Viola Road, and you get all the way down to the intersection of Union, which is in Spring Valley. There's
Avon Gardens.
Avon Gardens, and it's a higher density as well. But directly to the letter that was just submitted to us signed by 18 people, in the rear, it is a little bit different, and I hope you address that concern
correct.
that you heard.
That is absolutely correct. To the rear, there is a small pocket, not insignificant to the folks who live there, nor to us, but there is a small pocket of development at the R25 size, a 25,000 square foot single-family home size. The width of that pocket is 1,400 feet. That's the distance from Temple Bethel's rear lot line to the apartments. I believe they call it Knoll Manor. It might be called might have been called Victoria Gardens at one time. 1,400 feet. Now, to put that in perspective, what 1,400 feet is, and I just checked it today, that is the distance from the intersection of 59 and Airmont Road and the police department driveway.
Well, and that is significant to me in what reason?
Well, because what I'm saying to you is that it's not as if we are trying to intrude on a large area of single-family residential development.
However, if your house is in that 25 zone there, you're butting up against that.
Absolutely.
It affects you.
It affects to a certain extent.
If I might chime in here too, I take a little bit to your statement that this is no longer a neighborhood. Because to some of the people that still live there, that is their neighborhood. And I've been around here, and within that distance here and there, I come from Sacra. Within that distance, you could probably get Foxwood Avenue, Hillcrest, Hillside, all in that area. That's still a nice neighborhood.
Well, this will be a nice neighborhood too.
I don't want to, within those 18 signatures there, they're trying to compromise, and I want to work with them, but I don't want to belittle anyone's. They bought these homes many years ago, and they like to still try to keep it the same character that they remember it as. So
absolutely, and
you're going to tell us how you want to ameliorate.
I'm going to tell you before I get to that. Okay, let's take a look at the neighborhood itself. and the proposal that we have. The proposal that we have is for a cul-de-sac to come south from Viola Road and to dead end within that 5.5 acres. So there's not going to be any traffic coming from this new neighborhood, from this new project, out into the neighborhood to the south. So there will be no cross-pollination, no traffic. People who are going to walk along Viola Road. There's bus routes along Viola Road and, of course, on 306 as well. So it's all focused north towards Viola Road. The traffic pattern is basically a cul-de-sac in the area to the south. It's a pattern of roads that creates a series of loops, all of which come into and off of Route 306, approximately opposite, near Butterman Place, which, by the way, is an R15C district. So in terms of whether there is going to be any traffic impact on the folks who live to the south, there isn't going to be any. Whatever traffic is going to be there is going to be dissipated by the time it hits Route 306 or Union Road, gone. In terms of the visual impact, that's where you're going to have some issue with respect to two homes. There are exactly two homes that butt up against this property to the south. We certainly understand the need to provide screening between these houses that we're proposing and the existing houses. However, the board should remember that if this were developed as an R25 subdivision, under your zoning code, the setback is 35 feet. It's the same 35 feet that you have in an MR8. The building sizes probably be almost about the same. There'll be a little more building. There'll be 4 buildings here instead of, say, 2 buildings under a R25. But again, we're talking about the possibility of very large homes on an R25 subdivision.
And the MR8, the setback is?
The setback is 35 feet. It's the same 35 feet. So what you're going to, and the height limitation, by the way, is the same as well. The height that we're going to be at is, 35 feet?
It's 30 feet to the east.
To the east and 40 to the center.
40, yeah.
There you go.
That's
So-
the same here as an R25?
Yes, sir. So the massing of the building is not dissimilar to an R25. What you do have is you have obviously more density, more people, but all of that density is focused to the north and away from the existing neighborhood. Now, one of the things that we could have done, frankly, we didn't want to do, the applicant didn't want to do, neither Temple nor the applicant, could have put up a big apartment building, okay, which would have been, 4 or 5 stories high, everybody packed into one, big parking lot out in the back, big play area. It would not have worked in this neighborhood. It doesn't fit. All of the buildings that are there are low slung. We wanted to have a more neighborhood feel, and that is why the proposal is for what are essentially semi-attached homes. And those semi-attached homes are right around a cul-de-sac, and again, that cul-de-sac faces to the north, away from the existing neighborhood. Everything in the project is aimed away from the existing neighborhood in order to minimize the impact on that existing neighborhood. And then when we get into the planning process, we will figure out with the planning board and hopefully with the neighbors an appropriate method of screening.
If I may,
Sure.
I understand the juxtapositioning and that it is focused out to Viola Road. And I think that the MR8 works very well there. I think the rectangular lot and next to the temple, I think it works very well. I just always had that concern about the people in the rear. And as long as the screening and that is taken into effect, and kind of any ways that we can minimize the visual that they would have to look at, makes a big difference, even if it's a different type of articulation or, things that will soften
Right.
that look.
These homes, and we have the, you have the rendering? The rendering. Which one is this? Yeah. Hold that up. Give me my pen. That is a satellite rendering of the proposed development.
Where are the two homes that you said that
Is it
would
the
be?
red roof and the white roof in the back, the
No, actually, it's,
blue roof?
These two.
Yeah.
Have there been any discussions on how we might, look, again, I don't want to just say, like, there was a tragic accident out in San Francisco and there was a plane crash and people said, well, only 2 people died. I don't want to hear that. There shouldn't be any deaths, but I also don't want to affect even only 2 people. If there's a way we could accommodate those 2 people to ameliorate their situation,
Yeah, I think in their letter, they said it has to go to like 2 stories or maybe if that's not feasible, some way that the architecture could give a better visual from the back, although that is a large buffer there.
it looks like a large buffer there.
That's all wooded there?
Actually, the trees on our site is wooded. The trees on the neighboring site are not, because
To do any of the infrastructure improvements, will those trees have to be taken down, or will those trees, all those
Actually,
tracing?
The plan is, there's a couple alternatives, but the plan is to save the trees along
The buffer area.
the rear of our property, make it a sort of the buffer, and maybe even add additional trees in that area.
Those are mature trees there, aren't they?
yes.
There are.
It's a beautiful proposal.
What about a
Thank you.
play area? I don't know off the top of it, but I don't see any play areas.
Well, the play areas would be the backyards of the individual homes.
So on this, they're going to put in play sets for each
No,
individual house?
no.
Or
It would be-
the
it would-
ability for homeowners to put in?
Exactly.
Some
Each-
people actually prefer that because they're afraid they don't want their kids so far out of
Right.
sight.
That's also, frankly, one of the other benefits of doing it this way rather than the large apartment block is that we don't have to put up a big play set that would require maintenance and supervision, et cetera. This way, individual homeowners could make their own decisions as to what type of recreation facilities they want for their children, just as any other homeowner would
It looks
have.
like the type of neighborhood I grew up in.
Looks like the type of neighborhood I grew up in, too.
You turned out all right.
Except it doesn't have a stream that'll flood.
Okay, why don't we leave that buffer for the moment, and why don't you continue and tell us about the other aspects? And
Sure. Okay. One of the things that is important in this particular hearing is, with respect to zoning, is whether or not this is consistent with your comprehensive plan. I mentioned before that you had your 2004 comprehensive plan, and that the neighborhood did not look like it does now. The comprehensive plan at that time had a basic vision of how the town of Arapahoe should grow. It envisioned concentric circles of density emanating out from, for example, Muncie, which was already more dense, and as you got further away from the center of Muncie, that things would get less dense. And that was fine in 2004, and that reflected what happened in 2004. But you were also very farsighted at that time, because you recognized that development patterns change, population patterns change, and that you might need to deviate from this idea of concentric rings. And so you put into your comprehensive plan specific criteria for rezoning to multifamily districts. Okay? And was specific for multifamily districts. And there were a number of criteria, and I'll go through them very, very quickly. That the property has to be of sufficient size, at least 4 acres, that there has to be access to a major road, that there has to be proximity to public transit and pedestrian access, that there has to be surrounding high-density residential or commercial development, there has to be available infrastructure, there have to be no environmental constraints such as wetlands or steep slopes or the like, and that there has to be a need for housing in the area. And in the supplemental material that I presented in response to the County Planning Department's letter, I went through each of those criteria in quite a bit of detail, and I promise you I'm not going to do that tonight.
I read it.
I assume that all of you did. But the bottom line is that we meet each and every one of those criteria. Okay? And having met those criteria, okay, that means that this request is in fact consistent with the comprehensive plan as envisioned back in 2004. So the town board should congratulate itself on being so farsighted, and I know that Mr. Lang is very proud of that because I know he had a hand in it. But that is the basic issue when you're rezoning. Is the rezoning consistent with the comprehensive plan? And it's my belief, as presented in the supplemental materials, that in fact it is. We also did a traffic study. Actually, we did a number of traffic studies, and the traffic study basically says that for all the intersections that are studied from, I believe it's Route 306 all the way down to Union Road, there will be no change in the level of service. Okay. Will there be an impact on traffic? Well, of course there's going to be some impact on traffic. You're going to be putting 44 families there. But the road is such that it really does not have a high level of use at this point, and that level of service is not going to change according to the traffic engineers.
Do you know what those intersections were rated?
C.
C's?
The worst case was C. Some of them were rated at A. I think the worst case was at the west driveway of the Ramapo High School loop at the time that the buses left.
Because we have some on Union Road that going further down toward New Hampstead that are F's. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
a C there?
Right. The worst case is a C, and you have A's and B's as well. And because of the lineup of the proposed road with the driveway loop, that proposed road would also be a C. At the request of your planning consultant, we also did an archaeological survey. That archaeological study, which was done in June of this year, found that there were no historic or prehistoric sites, and there were no artifacts that were
I
found.
remember dropping some stuff there as a kid. I guess that wasn't...
I don't know that that counts for an archaeological study. And lastly, as I said, and as you can see from the rendering, we are very cognizant of our neighbors and of the need to maintain some of the privacy. You know, the reality is that nobody likes building that is going to happen on the vacant land that's next door. Okay, I've been doing this for 32 years. Okay, every time a vacant site comes up, neighbors come up and complain. You know, but it's been such nice woods for all these years. I like to hike back there. I like to walk my dog back there. I like to trespass back there. You know, the reality is that eventually somebody's going to build on all of these vacant pieces of property. So the question is not, can we maintain these pristine woods, but can we develop this property in a way that's smart, that provides for the needs, in particular the housing needs that we have and that are very pressing in this area, and can we also mitigate the impact of that extra development on the folks who have been there for a long time.
Well, no truer statement has ever been made than one you just made. As a child growing up, I remember speaking with Ed Wallace, a supervisor in the 50s, about the property behind where I grew up. I mean, it was all woods on Campbell Avenue. And he didn't see any reason that the town was going to be changing it. Unfortunately, though, then Mr. McAleavy was the supervisor, but the village of Suffern annexed the property on that side of Campbell. On the other side is still the town property, but they annexed it and they put in Bon Air. So, you know, that's, I guess, about 26 units per acre. And it does change your life and it changes your lifestyle. And that's why this project, I really like this project. I like knowing the area. I really prefer these are beautiful two-family units with separated, and so everybody has a little piece of land, and I still do have that major concern that I know residents do, and we're going to open it up and hear from residents about the back. But I see that 35-foot buffer there, and if it's all wood, and then that is not going to be removed for some type of any retention basins or underground. I know probably have some underground features here, correct on this?
Yes.
Rhonda?
Yes.
Yeah, they are all located by the Bethel, Temple Bethel. They're in these backyards over here.
So they're in the side yards?
Yeah, by the way, that's not a
Side yard
35.
by Temple Bethel.
Yeah, that's not a 35-foot buffer. That's a 35-foot yard. And under the code, there's a difference.
I understand. So the infrastructure, the underground infrastructure, which will be sand and water quality basins, as well as retention.
Yeah, for
Well,
circulation
not yet, not
and
yet.
some leaching wells and so forth like that. Yes.
And that will be between the temple and the backs of the houses on the east side.
Correct.
That's correct.
Where it's designed, yes.
Okay. So you won't need to go into the wooded area in the back?
No, we can't go into the wooded area with the drainage system. There's no place to drain out. The
Okay.
only outlet is over here by the temple, so that's the only place we can put it on this property.
And obviously, there's zero runoff coming off of this property?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, that's the law, but I mean,
That's-
you actually, may even be doing some things with the type of underground structures you're putting in that will improve the water quality on the property.
Well, yeah, we hope so, yes. Yes.
You don't sound convinced.
Well, right now the runoff is in the forest. It's, you know, it's trees, it's grass. We're going to be putting pavement, but we are going to be
But the
putting
zero-
in detention basins, we're going to be putting in water quality basins, we're going to clean the water, so,
The zero runoff, though, where is it going into?
It goes, zero peak rate of discharge means that it doesn't come off faster than when it did before. Obviously, the runoff from the grass area is going to run slower than off of the pavement area. So zero peak rate of runoff means that
You have to catch it and...
we have to
and
slow it down. So we're going to catch it in an underground basin, in some 60-inch pipes under the ground, and we're going to let it release it slowly so that it doesn't release any faster than it does right now with the grass there. It's still, it's zero peak rate of increase, but it's still going to have some runoff coming off.
Thank you.
Yes.
Unless the board has questions, that concludes our presentation.
Yeah, Councilman Ullman.
I said that with a lot of trepidation.
First thing I'm going to comment is the parking, I think, is done very well. There's pretty much an extra parking space over code per unit.
There is. There are 2 parking spaces per unit, but there is also a significant amount of, I don't know exactly how much, but there's a significant amount of guest parking.
Almost, I think, pretty much an extra parking spot per unit, total of the total project.
Just say yes, yes, yes.
Are these going to be condos or separate units? Is there going to be a condo association?
This will be condominium.
So there's going to be a condo board that's going to be in charge of the whole property?
Yes.
Because that concerns with that emergency access.
Right.
Who's going to maintain that gate and make sure that that stays an emergency access? I'm assuming the condo board will.
Well, it'll be a joint responsibility of the condo board and Temple Bethel, because it's going to be, that emergency gate is actually going to be right on the line, and obviously there will be a Knox box and keys given to emergency services.
And that's going to be maintained by the condo association?
Yes.
There are 2 units that have only 20 feet setback on the sides. I'm assuming based on the map, they're not facing any residential. Those are facing the base Mikra, and the other side's facing the temple.
The units, actually, all the units have 20 feet between them.
I'm talking about the setback of the property line.
On the setback? No.
The 2 units
Oh, 2 units?
on the
I'm sorry.
side.
Yeah, those are the 2 in back here, by Temple Bethel and by the school or whatever.
Sorry.
Right, so it's not facing the residential area?
No.
To clear that, okay. The play area still remains a concern by me, a big concern. 35 feet in the backyard of a 2-family house that's not called play area.
Well, it's 35 feet on each side.
On the side.
There's,
You got 20 feet between buildings, and you got 35 in the back.
right, in the back of each side. These buildings will be split, basically, they'll be split vertically, so it'll be like a townhouse situation, so each side will have its own backyard.
And how wide would you say a building is?
The buildings themselves are 50 feet wide, so each building is 25 feet, so you got a 35 by 35 backyard.
Except,
sorry.
you want to go? Or
No, sorry.
Okay. Except on the sides, the buildings facing the residential area, part of that 35 is a buffer. So those people have no backyards. They have maybe 15 feet backyard.
Well, they will have a smaller yard. Councilman Ullman, not everybody wants a big backyard. The house that I live in now, where my children all grew up, we really didn't have a big backyard. There are so many ways for children to play, so many places for children to play, especially in the town of Ramapo and Rockland County, and that it's not always necessary to provide everything within the backyard. Hopefully this will be a tight-knit community and people will be friendly with one another and children will play in each other's backyards, and hopefully also there won't be fences between those yards, and so you'll have a nice open area. When I grew up, that's what we used to do, is we used to play in everybody's backyard, and we didn't worry about lot lines or anything like that, and frankly, we didn't worry about fences either.
But it is 44 units altogether with very little area of.
I lived in a garden apartment, Mr. Ullman.
That's about
I live also
1,200 square feet.
We got a nice play area by us where I live. Next question, Pat, this is gonna be a big one, so I don't know if you wanna go first?
No, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. This is more, not specific to this project, but overall to zone change and development. This town board gets slammed continuously by opponents or whatever you want to call them. We'll leave them nameless. That slam us all the time for, we cater to a certain segment or to a certain group, and we do zone changes, and there's that misconception that we cater to the Orthodox community or whatever it might not be. Why would you say this is smart planning and smart development to allow 44 units to come in over here?
Okay. Your comprehensive plan is telling me that it's smart. Your comprehensive plan laid out all these criteria for multifamily housing, okay? And we meet or exceed each and every one of these criteria. I don't know what the concerns were with respect to some of the other zone changes. I can guess.
I wouldn't say concerns, misconceptions.
Fine, misconceptions. Well, we should certainly not allow misconceptions to rule what the town board does, and I know that you don't. We have, let's put our cards on the table here. In many respects, a lot of the misconceptions are with respect to zone changes that are deemed to benefit members of the Orthodox community, and they are opposed by folks who are not members of the Orthodox community. We have the interesting situation here where we have a Reform temple working with an Orthodox builder to build homes that are probably going to be occupied by members of the Orthodox community. Many years ago, when Herb Reisman was the supervisor, he had a commission called the Commission for a More Harmonious Ramapo. I happen to be the chairman of that commission. Why, I don't know. But, and one of the things that, even back then, we were trying to find ways of bringing folks together. Here we actually have, brought a small portion of those communities together in support of this particular situation. Did the temple want to sell the property? Of course not. Okay, it would have much preferred to have been able to keep that property and hold on to it, but it recognized that it needs to sell the property in order to maintain its place in this location. Okay, it's been there for 50 years. Okay, I'm a member of the congregation, by the way. We don't want to move. Okay, we have a beautiful building. Okay, it is a spiritual home to all of us. And yes, it's just bricks and mortar, but those bricks and mortar mean something. And we want, and despite the fact that the neighborhood around us has changed completely from what it was when it was originally built, we've stayed there and we've made a commitment to stay there. So I don't think
you make a very good point, and I don't want you to yield your time, but there are other things that would be more draconian that the yeshiva that the temple could do here
Sure.
on this property. And as a matter of fact, even on this property at one time, the temple was thinking about putting in a cell tower, and the people in the area didn't want it there. And working with the temple, we moved the cell tower to the Brick Church Cemetery.
That's correct.
As you may remember it. And so I think the temple has always been a good neighbor. Will continue to be a good neighbor. And probably need your services as chairman of the Harmonious Round Pole even more all the time. Go ahead.
And my understanding is that the sale of this property is contingent on the zone change as well.
Yes, of
So
course.
it's not that the applicant is the builder coming here, this is rather the temple coming, requesting a non-Orthodox temple. And the reason why I stress, and not that it makes a difference who's coming, but of this misconception that, it's only the Orthodox, or Orthodox is a non-Orthodox temple coming here. And I do want to add, it's maybe not a question, but more on the record, I'm very good friends with Michael Klein, our attorney, and I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the members. I'm not saying I know them per se, but I'm familiar with people that are members, and I don't know how they voted amongst the temple, and it's irrelevant to me how they voted, whether to do this contingency or not. But some of those members do come down by every zone change, even though they don't live anywhere in the area, to say that it's bad planning, yet they might still be here, and I don't know which way they're going to speak. They didn't have the chance to talk yet I don't see those same members here saying that this is bad planning.
I can't speak for them, Mr.
Just
Ullman.
wanted that for the record. Thank you.
Okay.
You've
Deputy
answered my
Supervisor Withers?
Thank you. A few years ago, I was a legislator serving the District 12 in the county of Rockland, and at the time, the supervisor just mentioned that Suffern had annexed, from Rampal had annexed the village of Suffern, all those units in the back of Suffern, which is known as Stonegate in the Bon Air area. Sandra Galiff out of Ossining, New York, is the chair of the property assessment board up in Albany. She's Assemblywoman out of Ossining. She was making a bill that some of the people that live in Bon Air, like you said, you downsize the townhouses and stuff like that, get away from the bigger houses, to maybe afford a little smaller tax base. What rate are these homes, these condos, and these townhouses going to be? Because what I'm pretty much understanding is that any new properties being built as townhouses and co-ops are going to be fully assessed as full value homes, not a shorter, smaller rate.
They will be assessed at however they are required to be assessed by the assessor.
And they're not going to look for any protection under the yeshiva or anything like that? or-
Oh, no, it's not an not-for-profit. Absolutely not a not-for-profit.
Okay, thank you. That's
Any
it.
other questions? And then we'll.
And it's a great project, it's a great
Yeah, thank you.
rendition. Thank you.
And then people can ask questions
Yes,
again
one last
after,
question. I think this might
the,
be more towards Michael Speckman
sure.
to you.
Then we'll listen to the
Could we
public.
enforce, or when we do this, if we do decide to vote the zone change, to make it that the condo, that it must be part of a condo association?
We can make that a condition, I
make that
believe.
Because that would answer a lot of the park areas, because before you build a fence in your backyard, you now have to go to condos. That means everyone's agreeing to having a fence rather than being private owners coming and doing what they want.
If that's something that you're going to consider, I would ask that you just refer to some sort of generic ownership regime or governing entity. Right now, we're thinking about condominium. It may come about that because of financing or other reasons, a homeowners association may be more appropriate. I don't know if you're familiar with the difficulties that condominium builders are having these days with financing. It may turn
Well, I'll
out...
tell you right now, since we have the Elm Street, there are new laws, and if you had 44 units and you had 20 of them that people had contracts with, they would not be able to get mortgages until 22 of them had contracts.
That
You
is-
have to have 50% before you'll get any
Right.
mortgages. So you may want to break them into smaller condominium units,
Yeah.
but I understand your point.
Or it may even go co-op.
Co-op are probably even worse.
That may be.
Co-op's probably going down, but
That may
some
be.
sort of association that's going to ensure that
Sure.
everyone's needs are met and that the
And
upkeep of
heard,
the whole
and
park.
Yes, absolutely. And as you know, there are homeowners associations and homeowners associations.
Okay, so you heard our request there,
Yes.
Councilman Ullman's request, and now we'd like to hear from people. So I'll just go by the list that I got here. First one is Adam Kahn from 17 Langeries Drive. Yes. And we just repaved that.
Yes, you did.
So
Thank
the
you.
devastation in Sandy, I was up there many times, or in Sandy.
Much
And
appreciated. My daughter thanks you. She can now roll the blade and.
I'll pass that along to
Yeah.
Superintendent Highway.
Much appreciated. Thank you,
And
Mr.
the highway
Supervisor and Town Council. Again, my name is Adam Kahn. I live at 17 Language Drive. Basically, this neighborhood is the shape of a reverse P, meaning what? Meaning you have Zabriskie Terrace, which is the curve of the P, and you have a straight line down, which is Languries. I live at the, how do you want to call it? At the top of the P. And I have a bird's eye view of the neighbors who will be affected, by this development. I'm a relative newcomer to the neighborhood. I've been here about 7 years. Many of the people have been there more than that, up to 20 plus years. I do take a little issue with what Mr. Manuel called a insignificant neighborhood, 1,400 insignificant feet. We're a very close neighborhood.
He was trying for something there, but I don't know.
I don't know.
if he was
It didn't
successful.
go over very well with me.
He's a good man, though.
And the deputy supervisor picked up on that right away.
I know, I saw that too. I mean, we're all very close. We have an email list that everybody in the neighborhood shares. We share in each other's happy times, everybody's sorrows. Our kids play together. We're very, very tight. I want to add also is that we are not opposed to development. I mean, people have to live somewhere. Bethel owns this property. They have a right to develop it. However, they go from a R25 to an 8 per acre, unit density. That's a 500% increase in density. That means you may get 500% more people on that same parcel of land with the same type of a setback as it would have been for a single-family home. That's a lot of people, one. So there's more than just a visual element. It's just the psychic element of there's a lot of people. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people. And I can see the neighbors who are affected. their homes from where I am, and especially in the fall when the leaves are down, you can see them quite well. And it's not just two homes. There's two homes directly affected, and there's one home on each side who has the diagonal view of the new development as well. So I just want to emphasize and try to keep it short that, I exhort the council, the town council, to listen to what the planning board said really last month. They had some serious doubts. The least they can do is make the setback a little bit more. Develop it multi-dwellings, but not to that degree of density, certainly not in the back. Make it maybe half of what they're planning. Make it a little bit lower. Just mitigate the impact of what's going to happen, to our neighborhood and into the visual aspect, the psychic aspect, the noise aspect. We welcome new people to move in, but just do it in a smart way. It doesn't have to be a 500% increase. I just wanted to add, if I could use
Sure.
this prop, the site itself, Mr. Emanuel mentioned, all of the institutions, which really are much closer to Viola Road. Their setbacks are considerable here, whereas the site being developed, the homes will be coming up very, very close to the affected 4 homes over here, which is very different than how these institutions are right now. I know the temple itself, there's a lot of trees there, which also helps. So again, it would definitely go over much better with our neighborhood, be a much more friendly approach, and we would probably be much more agreeable if indeed the density close to our neighborhood is mitigated. And I'm sure that after this is built, and it's going to be a beautiful development, our kids will play with the kids who live over there, et cetera, and everybody will be, happy. At the same time, just take into account how not to so radically change the way we currently live, to change it by a factor of 5. So again, please, take into consideration what the planning board, suggested last month, and that should really affect the outcome here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Next is Dr. Stephen Renzoni, MD. I don't know if I said that correctly, right? Close enough? You can keep talking, I just need to say something.
Hello. First, the democratic process here is it's wonderful to see. I've not ever participated in this kind of thing. Mr. Emanuel gave a beautiful presentation that it sounds like you've spent many hours preparing. I've spent 1 hour listening to the comments, and I live in this neighborhood. I've lived in this neighborhood 15 years. I relocated from San Diego, and what I found is a very tight-knit neighborhood. I'll echo Mr. Khan's comments. We definitely we're basically are a family, and that's a big difference than we had in San Diego, where there's quite a bit of isolationism. We came from a very big house in a very wealthy neighborhood, and our current neighborhood is very wealthy in things that count in family values. One of the things, I moved in this neighborhood, I wasn't raised in an apartment complex like Mr. Hayes. I happen to enjoy a big yard. I happen to pay a lot of money for my house to have a big yard. My neighbors happen to also enjoy the freedom of buying a house that had a big yard, and we happen to enjoy that aspect. The Planning Commission apparently has said that this will have negative effect on my neighborhood. I don't need to elaborate what those negative effects are. I think it's already been elaborated by the Planning Commission. I don't think anybody of the Zabriskie Terrace Langrese complex says, don't build this, stop building this. Nobody's saying that. We're saying make a compromise. And to change the zoning is a very big deal. You don't buy a piece of property expecting the zoning to be changed to allow a massive housing complex. I don't expect you to not build on a forest, but I also expect a skyscraper not to be built next door either. A 500% increase is a very dramatic change. So we're not saying don't do it. We're just saying compromise, follow the compromise that the Planning Commission, the Planning Board recommended with the setbacks they recommended, and with the 2 stories rather than the larger 3-story buildings that are immediately adjacent to the neighbors. Please make the compromise. Please accept the compromises that we've offered. That's my.
Thank you, Doctor. Devorah Heyman.
Hi. Okay, I've been following all this. I unfortunately was out of town the last time you had a meeting. I wasn't able to get up and express my views, and I have been coming to Muncie for literally the past 20 years. I've lived here only for the last 5 years when a friend of mine, when I got married, my husband's been here in our current home for 14 years. And for 20 of those years, I came up to visit friends who lived up here and appreciated the beauty. I lived in Brooklyn, but I'm from Los Angeles, so I can appreciate also openness. And I appreciate the difference between Brooklyn and Muncie. When I moved up here 5 years ago, and I took a ride, because I stopped getting off at Route 59 to avoid the traffic, and many years passed, and I instead got off at exit 10 and 11. So for many years, I didn't make the drive between Viola to Route 59 going along 306. But now I did it because I had to go grocery shopping. And I was appalled and shocked what I saw once I passed, got down almost to Maple, this whole development that looked like I felt I was in Brooklyn. You could see wires, all the trees had been torn down. It was houses packed on driveways in front, no green, a little twig of a tree up in front. And it was disgusting. And I was like, what happened to Muncie? They've made Brooklyn. And that's the same thing that I feel that's going on here. My husband bought this house just like the other gentleman who spoke before me have said. These homes were purchased in a land that's free to purchase, where these are lots that are large, that have ample space, that a person chose to live here for these reasons. And again, I agree. We're not saying don't make the lot. I mean, it was the first time I got a chance to really look up close just a moment ago. But to do it in such a compacted way, where people are really, it's very small. I really wonder where the parking's going to go, because one street for all those houses is quite a lot. But I also I think I disagree with what he said about it being institutional along Viola Road. Anyone who's driven along near Or Sameach, I mean, I've always marveled at the beauty. It reminds me of UC Santa Cruz. You don't even feel it there. It's trees everywhere. Everything is set back. Even the campus, if you ever walked on it, it's absolutely beautiful. So to compare it to what's going on here, to me, is like night and day. Even Beis Mikra, I mean, I today just drove by it. I've never seen that building. There are so many trees and so set back. There is a sign on a wall that says Beis Mikra. You would never know that place is there otherwise. Even the other housing that are older, I don't know, the one on the corner of Union and 30 Viola, it's two-family. It's very, very spread out. There's a lot of grass. Completely different mindset. So I think all the comparisons of saying this is institutionalized, completely not. I disagree with that. Saying that there's other housing that's been built that's like even Hanford House, the one that's, I don't remember the name exactly, also very different. It's a little bit of one. It's spread out much more, and it's just a small amount of apartments. So I've seen what's happened with these all over Muncie. My husband keeps saying, why do you keep screaming and talking? Call someone. And it's just, I think what's happening to Muncie is sad. And it's a beautiful place. There's unfortunately, you know, everything's clear cut, and then they plant one little spindly tree. And it's not that all the people, I mean, everyone should have an opportunity to live here, but part of what makes this area of Rockland County so beautiful is its ruralness, the rural feel. I just was with a builder, because my husband works with the school, and the builder said in, gosh, when you go down, the name of the area, Saddle River, you cannot tear down a single tree in Saddle River without approval. My husband's from Sydney. There also, his sister had to build a carport, could not even tear down this palm tree in her own backyard because of rules. So it just, things are, I think, very out of hand in general. I welcome the development, but not at all in the way. I think it's very not in style and in the spirit and in the area of, in terms of the development of the area that we're in. And I also question, you have 44 units, but how many people per unit? Again, the density factor. You can't cram that many, 44 units times families. I know our beautiful, thank God, our Orthodox community, people have a lot of kids, thank God. It's a beautiful thing, but crammed in that much space, I see what goes on around. It's not a fun feeling, and it's not a comfortable feeling, and it doesn't give people a place to breathe. It's recreating Brooklyn, and there's a lot of land up here, thank God, and there's a lot of place for people to spread out, and I just feel that I want the town board to please take that into consideration. And just see if there's anything else I wanted to add. That's basically it. But
If you
tonight,
forgot anything, you're welcome to come back up and
thank
speak
you,
again.
but I would prefer not to have the zoning changed, actually, and I would really like it to stay as it is. There was another, actually, two, I think down the road on Viola near Union, they built 2 homes that are in there. That was done very lovely. I was upset they tore every tree down near the road, and so that people have no privacy, and you see the development sticking you in the face. So I think whatever development does have there, I would appeal to the town board to make sure that there's frontage of keeping the trees. I think it makes a huge difference, which is why you don't feel and you don't see these other institutions that the gentleman referred to, Base Mikra or Samak. They've blended with the landscape beautifully, and it's a pleasure. And I hope the town will actually, in further developments, even keep that in mind, because it's really quite sad what's going on. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Billy Landman, come right up.
Before I walked in the door, I didn't know how many men or how many ladies were on the board. So I'm starting saying ladies and gentlemen. I'll change that and say lady and gentlemen and everyone else. I stand before you tonight as the immediate past president of Temple Bethel in Spring Valley. It is important that I share my emotions with you about my dear, beloved religious home that has been a part of my life and my family's life for the past 30 some odd years. When I became a member, we were over 900 families. So we were on the waiting list as members back in those days. As I got more active in Temple, I was in charge at one point of hiring teenagers to watch our children during the high holiday services. We couldn't have Jewish children doing this because we were paying them. So we had to go outside of the Jewish community to hire babysitters. Supervisor St. Lawrence, how old are your twin girls now?
Well, I don't have twin girls. I have 2 daughters, but...
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought they were twins.
My youngest daughter is now 24.
Okay. They were teenagers then, and they both worked for us during one of those those high holiday
She just got a job in
times.
Los Angeles, which is way
Well,
too far
good for
away.
her. Probably not good for you.
No.
But good for her. You'll get used to it.
Yeah.
Bethel made its home at 415 Viola Road since 1965, when the building was constructed. And we've been a good neighbor to all of our neighbors for all of that time. We are, unfortunately, at a point in our life where we must sell part of our property in order to survive for the present time and grow into the future. Our hopes and dreams, based on these crucial times, hinge our future to the growth and needs of the Spring Valley and town of Ramapo area. When our temple was built, and where it stands today, some 48 years ago, many of our congregants lived in Spring Valley. Now, with demographics having changed, we travel to Temple by car. Excuse me. I grew up in an Orthodox part of Brooklyn. We only had one shul. It was Orthodox, across the street from where I lived. It's called Seagate. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. But one shul, and I'm a Reformed Jew now, and very proud of it. Proud of my heritage, every way you look at it. We come from all parts of Rockland County to this, our temple home. Our dedication to our beloved Temple Bethel is at least the same, if not greater now, but we need to sell this land to prepare for the future. our future as a Temple family and for the future of the town of Ramapo as well. Our rabbi of 30 years, Rabbi Ronald Mass, has just very recently retired. The only other rabbi who led our congregation had retired 20-some years ago, and just recently, Rabbi Louis Frischman, as we heard, may his blessed soul rest in peace, pass away. Part of our tremendous legacy is that we were led for all those years by 2 rabbis. Now, as we welcome our new rabbi, Rabbi Michael Shergel, to our congregation, we are in need of the proceeds from the land sale that we are here talking about tonight. The subdivision that is requested holds our future in it. We need funds to spruce up our beautiful but a little tired building. Please let us continue the legacy of Temple Bethel. We, with emotion and true concern and a very dry mouth, are asking you to help us keep alive and well. Thank you for providing me the time to speak tonight. Thank you. I see what
Do you
you're
want
doing.
to keep
I will.
speaking?
No, I'm finished, but that'll help me breathe. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy. And well said. Next is Stephen Foreman.
Seem to be a little squeaky. Good evening, members of the board and Mr. Supervisor and the community. I wrote this whole prepared thing, which I'm not going to let you off the hook of hearing.
Go right ahead.
But as a kid, I lived at the original Viola Gardens on the corner of Union and Viola, and walked to Temple along Viola Road from 3rd grade on until we moved to Suffern. And I've been a teacher and assistant principal at Ramapo High School for 8 years now, and have seen the area change over time. As a kid, that stretch of road was my hangout. I mean, even in 3rd grade, okay, I mean, times were different, but walking from Viola Gardens up to Temple Bethel, I don't know how many people would actually allow their children to do that now, or walk past that to 306. But it's not the same. The neighborhood is not the same. That there are houses that were there that are no longer there and have been replaced. And I was thinking about what Mr. Khan said about this development being a radical change. And now that I look at it from what Mr. Emanuel has shown us, it looks like a radical change to make it into a more beautiful neighborhood. It's kind of like a diamond in the rough, an oasis, a place that I would enjoy living at. And I'll tell you, as a kid living in Viola Gardens, you know, we did a lot of running around. It wasn't always at Viola Gardens. It was all the way up and down the road. And now that I see what it looks like, it looks like a nice area. And Ms. Heyman, you talked about Brooklyn, and you know, I have family in Brooklyn, and there it's attached, up and down the road, and this is not that. So, some of the things that have been said, I'm going to repeat, but Since 1967, 46 years ago, my family called Temple Bethel our synagogue. I was 2 years old at the time. But for much longer than that, Temple Bethel has been a place of worship for over 1,200 families. Some have come and gone, and some have stayed. But the commitment to families, not just Jewish families, has been a constant. We continue to be a part of the greater community as well as our own. We currently share space within Temple Bethel with a church who outgrew their building but could not find a place where they can continue to grow. There was no hesitation in the part of our members that there was no hesitation for them to say, come to us. The members of the church are part of our community, and most, if not all, live in the town of Ramapo. We also have 2 universal pre-K classes that serve families from all over the town of Ramapo, and these are qualified, low-income Jewish and non-Jewish children who are educated and prepared for kindergarten by our teachers. And as I said before, as an assistant principal at Ramapo High School, and as an educator, I know how important it is for children to be educated before they enter kindergarten. This is an amazing program, and one of but a handful of places, of synagogues, that offer it. And these children are a part of our community. Over the years, our congregation has become smaller in size, but as you can see, our commitment to our community has never wavered. We are committed to staying here in our current location because this is our community. After 46 years as a member of Temple Bethel, I have been given the honor of becoming the next president of Temple Bethel. And the next president of our congregation. Our Rabbi Emeritus, as Billy had said, Ronald Mass, has retired after 30 years, and we've brought in our new leader. We've created new programs, we've revamped our Hebrew school, and now we have an amazing nursery program. But to keep everything that I've mentioned and to continue to grow, we need to sell this parcel of land. Selling this land will ensure that we will remain a part of the fabric as well as the history of the town of Ramapo and this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman.
So if you bought one of these units, you'd basically be able to roll out of bed to work.
Yeah, basically. Absolutely.
And next is Ron, and is it Hannah? Hannah? Mayor, okay. You're up, Ron.
Good evening, council members, Supervisor St. Lawrence, and members of the public. I have been a member of Bethel. My family has been a member of Bethel for over 50 years. Bethel, of course, has been part of town of Ramapo for 65 years. I go back to the time when Bethel was located in the middle of Spring Valley, which is now, I think, an annex of Beckerly Lumber Company. So I was very happy as a teenager. Actually, I wasn't a teenager yet when Bethel moved to its location on Viola Road. I think at the time Viola Road was a 2-lane country road, actually, and I don't think either Ramapo High School or Caciat were there. So my family has been part of the community for many years. When we talk about changes, we certainly saw Spring Valley and the entire town of Rockland County change from the time when the Tappan Zee Bridge opened, to what it is today. So there have been thousands of changes. We live with them, we accept them, and we remained in the community. As it's already been said by Billy and by Steve, this is about our not only continuing for hopefully another 65 years at least, and it's not about we need this money to survive and pay bills. We need this money also to improve the property where we are. The building is old. 48 years is a long time. There have been no significant improvements to that building. We'd like to make it more energy efficient. We would like to make it more attractive, not only to our members, but to the community around the area. We believe that the property development that is being proposed is not insignificant to the neighborhood. There's no question. Certainly feel for the neighbors and the fact that their neighborhood will be changing. But the fact of the matter is, for Bethel, our neighborhood will change as well. We have utilized that property to some extent. When we had nearly 1,000 families, we used that open field. Actually, my father was one of the people who helped develop that field into an area where the children of the religious school and the nursery school could play when they were on site. And we also used it for social events as well. But we realize that times have changed and we need to sell the property. And we also are neighbors as well. We will be neighbors to this proposed site. We will be to the east of the site. Certainly, it's going to be the entire property from where our building is right out to Viola Road. We think it is a quality property. We think that the plan as it's designed, while it is more dense than the neighbors would like, we think it is a high-quality area, and we think it will benefit all of those who are in that area. I mean, we all have houses. When we buy houses, we also don't buy them just to live there. They are investments. And I do believe that this property, while it will generate tax revenue for the town, that it will not hurt the home values of that area, and certainly will not hurt the value of Bethel, and will not create an eyesore next to us where members might question whether or not they would want to become members because of it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. And next is Jeff Strauss.
I just wanted to say that, contrary to what Mr. Manuel says about traffic, that this project will generate more traffic. Viola is already crowded. Viola Road is already crowded, and I don't think the neighborhood should be subjected to more cars, buses, possibly whatever. 306 is a mess. When you drive down 306 in Viola, there's always traffic. When you're coming up from, let's say, Maple Avenue, 306 towards Viola, there's always traffic. And I think this kind of project for this area, excuse me, is just too much, and it should be scaled back, to a reasonable amount. And I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Strauss. Next, Daniel Gleisch.
Good evening. I think we're all in agreement here tonight. I think we're all saying the same thing. Life is about balance. And Mr. Supervisor, you summed it up very nicely. You said there's a need for the project, you like the project, but at the same time, there's a need to take the neighbor's quality of life into consideration. And that sentiment was shared by your planning board when we were here 2 months ago on May 7th. They listened to the presentation of the project, and they also felt that there's a significant detrimental impact to the neighbors, and that screening is not going to be enough to mitigate that. During the course of their presentation or their discussion, they threw out 4 different possibilities of how to mitigate this significant negative impact that the project's going to have on the neighbors. The first idea they threw out was to reduce the density from 8 units per acre to 5 units per acre, although in the discussion they said, well, there's no MR5, so that wasn't a possibility to throw out on the table. Another one, which was actually one of my favorites, was to do something that was done on the Mariner project development, whereby they made the property that abuts the single-family neighborhood to match it. So one idea that was thrown out was there's a need for the MR8 project, but along the back property line of the Zabriskie Terrace neighbors, make that density R25 so that the neighbors who bought homes with the knowledge of it being an R25 zone will not be negatively impacted. The third idea that was thrown out or was put out there for discussion was that instead of having 4 multifamily units along the back, along the neighbors by Zabriskie Terrace, it should be reduced to only 2 to further mitigate the impact. Another idea was to increase the rear setback as well as to require a buffer, a wooded landscape buffer. Currently there's about 100 feet of woods along the property line. The idea was let's increase that, keep a large significant amount of those trees, and then have the setback start over there. After much discussion, your planning board decided not to make a recommendation because they couldn't decide at the moment which one made the most sense. So they specifically did not make a recommendation, wanting to send a message to the town board to say that they're against the project and that there are significant detrimental impacts the way that it is right now. So what I request of you is that this town board listen to its planning board and some of the ideas that it implemented or would like to implement to mitigate some of the negative impacts that exist so that we can move forward together and reach a happy balance. One last thing that a lot of my neighbors said, the Zabriskie, Solon, Langeries neighborhood is a very close-knit neighborhood. We share simplest together, happy times as well as sad times. And what's interesting, I think, tonight, no one's coming out and screaming and yelling and saying, stop the project, we don't want it. We're all acknowledging that there's a need, and we're trying to seek balance. Balance for the temple that needs money, balance for the community that needs more housing, but at the same time, balance for the people that live there and whose lives are there and homes are in the area. So that's what we ask of you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glash. Next is Robert Romanowski.
Robert Romanowski, 183 Maple Avenue, Muncie. The way this project is set up now, it's going to be a very dense neighborhood. With 5.5 acres with MR8 multiplying 8 by 5.5, you get a total of 44 units in here, which will amount to more traffic and much more congestion. Whereas currently with half-acre zoning, you could put 11 single-family houses in here. When the town developed its master plan in 2004, it had the most density in the inner Muncie area where the housing is most needed, and moved out more, becoming less dense as the town moved toward its outer fringes. What this here is spot down zoning, trying to make an area much more dense than what it should be with the surrounding area. Another question I have is the temple says that they need to sell this property, which is fine, but why does the zoning have to be changed in order to sell this property? Why can't it be sold to a developer who will develop at R25? What hasn't been explained is why the zoning has to be changed to MR8 in order to sell this property. What I ask the town to is not to approve this zone change and allow the builder to build as per the current zoning regulations and what they allow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romanowski. Anyone else? That's the exhaust my list of those who have signed up, so raise your hand, come right up, sir. And state your name and your address for the clerk, please.
Isaac Sperka, S-P-E-R-K-A, 5 Langeries Drive, Muncie, New York. Couple of thoughts. Some of them I'm going to probably reiterate things that you've already heard. I'm going to try to be brief when that's the case so as not to take everybody's time with that. But I think one of the glaring omissions in Mr. Emanuel's presentation is the fact that the planning board made no recommendation. And it did intend to send a message. And intended to send a message because after all the traffic studies and after all of the rationalizations for how beautiful one particular project may look, when you look at what has happened in the overall area, you have an incredible change in character of the neighborhood. Now, I've been here for 12 years, and I did move from Brooklyn, and the comparisons are between here and Brooklyn are not that apt, but I'm going to mention one. In Brooklyn, and we talked about being chairman of the Harmony of Community Committee, and when we moved here, we said, you know, the people here in Muncie and in Spring Valley and in Suffern and in New Hampstead, they're such nice people. What is that about? And we were coming from Brooklyn. So, well, the people in Brooklyn, you know, it's just not as friendly. It's not the same kind of place. It's not the same kind of attitude. What's the difference? And I said to my wife, who was making this point to me, I said, just understand one thing. The people here in Muncie, many of them are Brooklyn transplants. So it's not the gene pool, it's not the people, it's the environment in which they live. And we are seeing the Brooklynization of Muncie in terms of the traffic, in terms of behavior, in terms of attitude, because of this pattern of downzoning. So that's just one thing with respect to the comparison to Brooklyn, which I think may capture some of the things that are going on. Now, traffic studies. Let's talk about traffic studies for a minute. Every traffic study, I've been to a number of these meetings, comes out and says, no real impact. Everybody who drives the roads knows otherwise. Now, the question is whether we are going to continue to die the death of 1,000 pricks of traffic studies. Hopefully, we will not. Proportion. Mr. Kahn made a wonderful point about proportion, 5 times as many. Let's make another, look at it a little differently. That area, Mr. Emanuel, which you kind of delineated by size, has, I believe, 52 homes in it. As small as you might want to make it seem, it's a lot bigger than the 5.5 acres. You're talking about 44 units. So 44 versus 52 in an area which is a fraction of the size, and with families which, thank God, are large. Now, is there... So I just want to put that in perspective, and maybe that's part of the message that the planning board was trying to send to the town board. A letter from Mr. Gleisch was read into the record. Mr. Gleisch is a dear friend, part of our tight neighborhood, but I respectfully disagreed at the planning board meeting, and I will do so here in terms of that, those particular recommendations. I think you heard from Mr. Gleisch tonight, and he has seen the wisdom of the planning board's approach, which was far more protective of the neighborhood, of the area, and avoiding this Brooklynization. Not that there's anything wrong with Brooklyn. Just a slight factual point. I was here 12 years ago. I think Bay Smicra was there at the time. So when the time the plan came about, 2004, I think that Bay Smicra had already been there, and I know Orsameach was there. So I'm just, and maybe I just misunderstood, you know, what you had said about that.
The original Orsameach was there, not the new proposal or the new building that was put there.
Okay.
And Bay Smicra was there, although it did not have its proper CO at the time.
Okay.
Of the master plan.
CO, but it was physically there.
It was physically there.
Okay. So just to clarify that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. And, you know, and it's we're very sympathetic to the temple. Very sympathetic. It sounds like a wonderful institution. Seems like wonderful people, presidents, people who are devoted to the neighborhood, have been here a long time, devoted to the temple, and that's wonderful. I'm also involved with institutions, private, tax exempts, and sometimes there is a need for fundraising. And the question is, you know, how do you do it? So while I'm very sympathetic to the temple and to its funding needs, I'm less sympathetic, and I think the neighborhood is less sympathetic, and I think it's important to kind of just put it out there, you know, what we're talking about. And I think the previous speaker, Mr. this gentleman here expressed it very well. What hasn't been addressed, and I won't reiterate all of his points, but what hasn't been addressed is why this is the downzoning that's being requested. And I would suggest that one of the reasons is because the temple needs a lot of money. What we're asking is that I think what we're asking is ultimately that the developer adjust his financial model and adjust his purchase price, and that there be other creative ways to raise money for the temple, as all of our institutions, unfortunately, are burdened in these times and need to do. It's a lovely place, and I'm going to remind the supervisor of a conversation we had back in probably 2004, 2005, where we were talking about the comprehensive master plan, and we're looking at our neighborhood, this very topic that we're talking about. And we looked at it, and you said, you see, this area where you are, because of the way it was planned, is not intended for and not going to be downzoned. That's not what we're planning here. Now, I don't know if you recall that conversation.
I do. I remember we spoke about that property at that time, and we also spoke about the property on Viola Road going west, across from Concord, and what was requested by the owners and what we actually were going to do in the plan.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we admire you so much, Mr. St. Lawrence, because you have an incredible memory.
It's insane.
It's scary. It's a little frightening. Yes, it is. But at least I'm relating it correctly, and so I'm glad. Yeah. Thank you. And with that, I guess I will, without repeating them, reiterate the 4 suggestions of the planning board to this board, and request that this board heed its planning board as it starts thinking about about this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Well said. Okay, come right up, sir, and state your name and your address for the clerk, please. We all know it, but
Barry Rosenblum, 1 East Blossom Road, Suffern, New York. I'm a member of the temple and the community for about 30 years. I just want to address one issue. They mentioned density and everything. We have the misfortune, and the community has had the fortune, of that our temple has dropped from almost 1,000 families to 400 families. We had an active nursery school all day long with cars coming and going. We had an active Hebrew school where we were planning on expanding the Hebrew school even. That's how many people were coming. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for services, Saturday for services, Sunday for Sunday school and different events, bar mitzvahs and weddings going on at the temple. That unfortunately has all dissipated. That's the need and why we have the need to do what we're doing. So we dropped almost 500, minimum 500 families. Well, you can make the math of how many cars and traffic and that would be in the neighborhood if we had those congregants still with us. So now when you're looking at 40 homes or 45 homes or whatever the number of homes exactly are, it's a minute amount compared to what the traffic and the activity and the community that has gone on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, every day, day and night in that community. And I just want you to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else would like to speak? Devore, it's Devore, right? Oh, Heyman, right. Devore Heyman.
Just 2 more quick points. Again, I only saw the diagram here tonight, and I didn't get a close look at it. But I just want to know where's parking, where are garages? One of the street is a cul-de-sac. I'm thinking what someone mentioned about the traffic along 306. If anyone's driving down there when school buses are letting off.
We'll have Mr. Emanuel address that for you directly.
Okay. Because I'm wondering where cars are going to, if there's no garages, which I don't know if maybe there are, where are cars going to be parking? If they're on the street, how's traffic flowing? Where are school buses going to go? I think there's a lot of questions
We'll
to be
have a
addressed
direct-
in there as well.
We'll have them answer both of those
Okay.
questions.
And I just wanted to add on that to this day, I have never seen, because I haven't driven in their driveway, but Base Mikra, I've never seen that building, literally. I don't even know what it looks like, and I drive by there probably daily, just to show the difference on how things were done. So, thank you. And thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, it's a great school. It's a great girls' school. I've been there many times, and they do a great job of educating the young ladies in the community. Yes, you may. Be our honor.
My name is Dave Holnick. I'm a displaced New Yorker, but I still come here for to escape the summer heat. Anyway, the way I look at this, Temple Bethel wants to sell this land for a builder to build homes for Jewish people. The need for the homes is here, the same way it's needed all over. Why are they stopping other Jewish people from moving into an area that is Jewish and they need the homes? That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
I think we should clarify.
It's being built for anybody could live there, but you're Mr. Foreman, you're back. You have the floor, Stephen.
I just wanted to address it was said there was a crowded road issue. So I travel that road every day. I now live in Suffern, and I come from College Road, I make a right onto Viola, and I come down and I cross over 306, right, and make a left into the high school. In the morning, so I get to the light at 306, and cars are going right and cars are going left. And there aren't that many cars going straight. So I cross over, pull right into the high school. When I go to a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, or if I have an afternoon meeting, I pull out around by high school without a problem. I haven't seen a traffic condition on that road since I haven't seen it even as a kid. So I've lived the traffic study. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you. And before Mr. Manuel answers the question that Devore brought up, and you'd like to speak, then come right up.
My name is Ephraim Grossman. I'm actually the contractor and developer on this project. Just for the record, I would like to bring it up in public, should hear exactly what sequence of event from when I start getting involved in the project and everything. As soon as I had a sketch project, originally we were interested in developing this MR16.
Right.
We had some informal meeting with the town, said no, let's not go for MR16, it's too much density. And we decided informally, I think appropriate should be MR8, and I went with that plan, MR8. As soon as I had a sketch, when I saw MR8, I said right away for the supervisor, whoever spoke to the town people, I said my concept of MR8, I would like to build big buildings, I'd like to have something small, so individual two-family houses. And we had a concept designed. As soon as I have it designed, I went over to Mr. Gleich, who was a tenant in my building. I called him over, Daniel, I am the contractor property next door to you, back close. I'd like to talk to you. Oh, gladly, he says. Come down to my office. And my first approach was to him, Daniel, my practice is usually to work with the neighbors, not against the neighbors. I'm here to talk to you. What would you like as a screen between us? His response was, Ephraim, I'm a developer, you're a developer, we're the same page, I understand exactly what you want. No problem. First of all, would you be able to give me the 15 feet setback of existing trees? I said, no problem. I'm here to even offer you more. I will design a screening between us. You name it, I will give it to you. Ephraim, fine, I think so, but give me, I wanted to really think about it, get back to you. He came back 2 weeks later and said, Ephraim, I would really like, I need more, I need some buffer. I said, buffer for what? oh, impact, so forth. So after 2 weeks, he says he would like to have 35 feet setback. I said 35 feet really means losing about, if you calculate the square footage is 35 feet, the whole length means about almost 10% of the project you're losing. It's a substantial difference in developing, but it makes sense, so forth. So we're going back and forth, and he said, you know what, Ephraim, I'll think, you'll think. So I did ask him, Daniel, do me a favor. I'm in the process of continuing this project. Get back to me in time. I shouldn't have to redraw it. I've met him in the interim probably 3 or 4 times in the same building. He never mentioned to me nothing. So I thought, you know, he's accepting the first order, the first agreement. 2 days after the posting was done and was mailed out, he called me up, Ephraim, I have an issue, I want to talk to you. So he came down, started negotiating 35 feet back and forth. I said, you know what, I'll try to give you 15 combining buildings, even though I don't like it because it's going to change the character of the building, of the project. I think it's, you know, I'm trying to keep one character, the whole thing of like small individual houses, attached houses. I don't want to start combining the buildings. And I really need the 44 units to make it work, but, you know, I'm willing to sacrifice something. So we're going in discussion 20 feet, and he said, okay, this 20 I got, now where's the other 15? I said, Dan, you're not reasonable. Let's be reasonable. So we parted. I looked up his other development, which he mentioned to me. He has a development in Highview Hills, which he went through exactly double my project. A project which entails 11 acres. It's an R35 zoning. He got 88 units, what I have. He got multiple units, 4-story high. And he got a buffer there, 20 feet, which is there, plus 50 feet setback, which is a requirement in R35. There was no giving. So I asked him, you know, Daniel, as a neighbor, as a good thing, and as a builder, why is it your backyard different than other people's backyard? We have 2 neighbors. I'm here to give you the screening as much as you want. You pick it, you choose it, I give it to you. And when it comes to your neighborhood, your development, you had 50 neighbors in R35, and you brought 88 units in 11 acres. So my question to the board is, I'd like Mr. Gleisch to respond to this question. Why is it my backyard is different than other people's backyard? If there is a concept that developers have a right of developing, and the town boards give it into proper calculations, is it fair? Does the impact or not? I think Highview, if you compare Highview to Viola, no comparison. That's strictly residential. And it's the R35 zoning, which has a 50-foot setbacks. And he got 4-story high, and he's telling me to do a 2-story high. He has 40 units around the whole project, which I have a copy if the town wants to see it. You know,
Well, Mr. Grossman, it's
Yes.
not up to you and Mr. Gleisch to have
Right,
this
true,
fight
true,
here
I
at our
see.
public hearing.
No, but
If
he's
you want to
comparing-
have that, maybe we could, you
No,
could
my
do that in
question
the
is,
hallway.
why are we comparing to Marina Drive? Why aren't we comparing it to Highview Hills? That's my question. Number
What-
2, there was one comment over here. It's a 500% increase. I think it's a 4% increase, four times as much. It's not 500. The question how you phrase it. I could have put out 12 units at R25. And if you figure in, any developer will say R25 today, the area doesn't warrant it because there's no, the price of a house in the area won't warrant an improvement on the R25.
So 4 times would be 48 units. It's a little bit less than 4 times.
It's less than 4 times. So the concept of 500 is wrong. You know, it's just a different terminology. So I would appreciate if the town takes into consideration. I know there was discussion on Marina Drive, but I think there was misconception that he's taking it that was an offer Marina Drive. And as I say, as I mentioned before, that
Well, Mr.
an
Grossman, I'm
R25
glad you got-
is 25 setback.
I think we heard you, and 4 times still, I don't think to some of the people, Mr. Strauss and Mr. Heyman, and that spoke, and the doctor, the good doctor, they would still think that was quite an increase, and Mr. Strauss as well. But you said something there, and I'd like to expound upon it. You said that you were having a conversation with Mr. Gleisch and that you were willing to give more of a buffer?
I was trying to work, yes, to work some buffer in between.
And
I think
you,
I would have...
you were trying to get to you said you were trying to increase it by 15 feet to 50 feet.
From 35 originally, in discussion with about 10 feet going back and forth, 20 feet, combining
And you also
buildings.
just said something about, you may have to give in 2 buildings, you just said.
Yeah, no, I was trying to get to understand by putting two
Well, I was
buildings,
listening.
two buildings together. Those two buildings, if you do that, you lose the character of the project because then you have the middle units don't have backyard access and front access. So I told him reluctantly it's going to be a tremendous burden on the project, and it's going to change the character of the project. I don't want to do it. So I was trying to see whether there's any room for negotiation, like give him 5 feet, 10 feet.
I guess
plus
what
screening.
I was trying to ask is, you're more familiar and intimate with this project than we are. We look at it, and and we certainly didn't want 16 or 12 units per acre there. That's correct. How would you ameliorate the situation in the rear, going to the homes in Zabriskie, where people have legitimate concerns? How would you be able, and I see your attorney wants to stand up now.
Yes, I will probably discuss it.
That's what he gets paid for. Okay, all right. That's what happens when you speak. You get cross-examined. Mr. Emanuel, you listened, and I do want you to answer Devor's question about the parking, but you heard what the residents said. It's
Absolutely.
the same tone as the very first letter signed by 18 people about the rear of the building. How can we, the rear of the property, how can we insulate if this board were to...
I'm sorry. It's also a very strong concern of mine.
Yeah.
Is the majority of the speakers that came out, they weren't opposed to it. They were rather wanted some modifications. And I think Mr. Fleisch was one of the first to get up and say he's not opposed to the project. He just wants some modifications on the residential side. And is there a way that, as the supervisor was saying, to sort of work something out that everyone should be happy?
Okay. One of the first things that we do, you folks see sort of the end product. You don't.
But just before you say anything, we have the ability to vote and to approve this zone change and to put conditions upon it.
I'm aware of that.
Okay, and I think you're kind of getting the feel from myself and Mr. Ullman, and I think the deputy supervisor kind of referred to a little bit. You're kind of getting our feel as to what. So go ahead.
As I was starting to say, you folks sort of see an end product. It's obviously not the end product, but it's one of the stops that has come up after a considerable amount of work happens among the developer, the engineer, the attorney, if there's a planning consultant, everybody. One of the things that you may not realize is the sort of things that go into creating the drawings that you see. And obviously we look at the zoning and we look at the setbacks, we look at what's required. But one of the first things that we also look at is how are we going to get emergency vehicles in and out of there, because that, of course, is extremely important. Okay? And the second thing that we also look at from the beginning is how does this impact the neighbors? And when we determine that there's neighbors that are impacted, how do we try to mitigate that impact? So it's not a matter of we're hearing this for the first time or we heard this for the first time at the planning board. We knew going into this, okay, we have an experienced project team here. We knew going into this that we have got to do this in a way that will mitigate the impact on the neighbors. Okay, we talked about some of the mitigation that is available simply because of the location of the property, the fact that everything flows out towards Viola Road as opposed to towards Zabriskie and Langeries. But I want Mr. Jackson, if he's done drawing, to talk about how we can achieve some of the screening that we're talking, that the neighbors have asked for and that we knew going into this we're going to have to provide, because that's the way you do a good development. So, Lenny?
John Lenny. Just for the members of the board, I do like the render, what's proposed to us. I do like I see. And I want to caution many of the people that live around there as well, is that what you see there, you might want to take what you know you're getting in the product. Because in the end, something worse could happen. But I do like what Mr. Gleichman is saying, is like, you're not totally against it, you want to try to compromise. Is that correct? Or? Yeah. Because we could have a golf course.
Lenny, are you still in the Hamptons?
No, I'm here.
I know you need Mike.
Before I go into a couple of cross-sections, I'd like to point out something that I think is apparent to everyone, but maybe it's not, because I've heard the property or the neighborhood described as a P-shaped neighborhood, or perhaps I
Reverse
recalled
thing
it,
he said.
or maybe he called it a hyperbolic paraboloid, I'm not sure. But the fact is, if you look at this plan very closely, and let me just show it to the public and the TV, what you see here is, here's the site, and the site is surrounded by the synagogue on one side, Bas Mikra on the other side, and on the other side of the street, across Viola Road, is the high school. And the site is right here in the middle, and it's actually insulated from the neighborhood. Now, we've been speaking and hearing about the neighborhood, and the neighborhood is here.
On the east, the west, and the north.
Yes.
But not on the south.
Correct.
Greatest concern.
Thank you very much. It's your turn to be the tripod. This is the neighborhood.
The high-priced diesel.
Yeah, this is, not bad. This is the neighborhood. This is the entire neighborhood. Langaris and so forth, and all the speakers are, I started coloring them in, but I lost track. But the fact is, the site itself is actually insulated from the neighborhood, and the access to the site is, of course, off Viola Road. So for all practical purposes, there's minimal effect of this particular site on this neighborhood. The only thing that I thought was the concern was the immediately abutting neighbors to the south. Okay, and it turns out that one of the neighbors, there are no trees on that neighbor's property, Mr. Gleisch, because he took them down. So the only trees in the area are the trees on the applicant's site, and there are some trees, of course, on the adjacent site. So the first point is the site itself is insulated from the neighborhood physically, and the only possible effect, or the immediate effect, is the immediately abutting people to the south. Other than that, the traffic on Viola, of course there'll be a slight increase in traffic on Viola. But that's the nature of when you build things. There's always an increase. The traffic, I think the numbers are 22 trips per hour. It's really meaningless. Of course, somebody referred to the death by 1,000 cuts, I think. I say, well, sure. But then again, I moved here in 1965, which is 48 years ago, which is amazing because I had people stand up and say, I'm here for 22 years. I'm saying, holy smokes, I'm here for 48 years? How did that happen? And what are these people doing on my roads? There was no traffic then. As a matter of fact, I was the town engineer 40 years ago when I sat in, well, you don't have one here right now. It's really amazing. I turned out to be the old guy.
Well, I'll be here 63 years on Saturday.
Congratulations.
And if I were the supervisor 63 years ago, I probably would have brought a lot more open space.
It would have been a smart move.
You know, the town was 10,000 people when I grew up, and it's 130,000 people and growing. And we do know we need the need for housing. I agree with you that the property is insulated on the three sides. I do want to get to that traffic, the parking question, and I do want to talk a little bit more about the playground area. But when a neighbor says, yes, there's some trees there, but when the leaves are gone, there's more of a visual impact, and he's right.
And there is. And we have, in fact, put together a couple of cross-sections. By the way, the photo is actually relatively accurate. It does look something like this. It shows you the screening adjacent to the site, and it shows how the site is insulated for the residences to the south. But we do have a couple of cross-sections and suggestions.
Lenny, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
If the property at the end of the cul-de-sac were repositioned by our planning board in some way, either moving it up so that there was a larger buffer, is there infrastructure back there that would have to be rearranged? Or is it
Actually, it would not. You could actually do that. It would make it tougher on the site, but there's no physical reason why I couldn't do that as far as the utilities. I'm not sure that that's even necessary, because by preserving existing trees in the back of these buildings, these proposed buildings, and by supplementing with additional trees, and you don't have to plant little tiny trees. We could plant real big stuff. We could actually provide a very nice screen here that could be evergreens, and that would, I think...
Is there enough property there for a berm without...
I frankly wouldn't put a berm in there. That's one of the alternatives we considered. But if you put a berm there, the berm kills existing trees. Sure. Trees don't like to be smothered by berms.
The ratio for the height to the...
I'd rather not bury trees. I would leave the trees alone. I would supplement it with additional trees in the rear.
As an engineer, could those buildings be those 4 buildings that are on the south side of the property, could they be juxtaposed further into the site, what you call the insulated area? I mean, I see there's parking. You have
I could
parking
put
there.
those buildings, and you just throw a dart, and I could put the buildings there. As an engineer, there's nothing physically to keep me from putting the
That
building.
corner building, you put it where that parking lot is. Yes.
Well, it changes. It does change
I mean,
things.
it would
And
bring it in.
by the way, this building is
That building, it doesn't concern.
Yeah,
That
by the way.
that building is next to Temple Bethel.
Yeah. Let me show you one other thing, which may be helpful. I'm not sure it will, but not. Do we have a colored version of this? What are we looking at? That's the same thing. You really can't tell the difference. I tried to move the buildings away a little bit, and you can't really tell. These are actually different plans. One shows the buildings as actually additional 10-foot. I couldn't spot. Yeah,
So
I couldn't spot it.
You have a plan where it's 45 feet.
I showed it just to see what it would look like. You can't really tell the difference. You have to look very
For the
carefully.
neighbor to the south, you would notice 10
I'm not.
more feet,
Let me.
trees.
Yeah. Let me show you one other plan, and let me see if I can grab it.
You heard Mr. Grossman say he was talking about 15 feet. Does that work?
50 feet is getting kind of squeezing the rest of the project together,
Somewhere
kind of
between
tight.
45 and 50.
I,
By shoes here.
I thought 45 was tough. It could be done. Let's face it, I could do things like that. Under the existing zoning, the R25, I just threw this together really quickly. But the fact is, because the setback requirements are the same and the building height is the same, if we developed under R25, we'd be having the same discussion.
Well, let's not go there because
Well, okay.
the whole density is different.
You make a good point.
It's different.
You make the point that if this zone change didn't take place and you build it as you could on the present zoning, the people in the south portion may get more worse of an impact, is what you're saying.
As a matter of fact, because this is a zone change.
That's not what we're trying to get to.
Okay, I just wanted to point out there's not a big difference, and the discussion about the impact on the neighborhood, I just wanted to show you physically by showing that overall plan that the neighborhood is really insulated from the site. What we're really after and what we're discussing is the impact, the immediate impact on the people to the south. And that could be done with screening. I don't know what the planning board is eventually going to require. It could be that they want a massive amount of evergreens back there. I don't know. But screening is not a problem. It shouldn't even be an issue. All the other questions and all the things we discussed tonight about traffic, they really disappear. They're minuscule. The only question tonight, I think that I've heard anyway, is how does it affect the neighborhood? It really doesn't affect the neighborhood. The real question is, can we screen the immediate neighbors? And I think we can.
Let me just throw this out. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but
I've been there before.
okay. The building that you just pointed, which is close to the Temple Bethel, which it would be the southeast corner, correct?
Right.
If that were pushed up to where that parking lot is, that would move it up a good 30 feet or maybe 50 feet more.
There's 56 feet here.
Yeah, and by the way, that's our emergency access is over here.
Okay, so if you moved it up closer to that emergency access and moved all those other the two buildings below it up, and the last building, the one that is close to the reverse P person.
Which one was that?
West corner.
Which is the reverse P?
That's it.
Oh, that one is?
These 4 buildings.
Yeah.
And if that building,
Oh, this
the
one?
one that's closest to the person that spoke with the reverse P was right there. And if that building disappeared and turned into the Ullman Park,
Thank you.
it would be a lot less impact on the people at Zabriskie, and it would be a park. And as a matter of fact, maybe the girls' schools could use the park at times. And I mean, life is full of compromises.
And Supervisor, if
Go
I may
ahead,
add,
Mr.
I've
Sullivan.
been coming on my 5th year on the town board. I've been to many public hearings, and this public hearing I think is from the few that are different from all of them. Most of the public hearings I've been to are not on substance, usually personal attacks against me or other board members or filled with hate speech or whatever it is. This public hearing has been, it's actually giving me a very hard time to decide what to do. Both sides are saying very reasonable, articulate issues, so I think that's what the supervisor is trying to go, is to get a compromise. You know, when someone comes to public hearing and just starts attacking me, how do you think I'm going to go? But here, everyone's come with legitimate, the temple is very legitimate. You have the neighbors clearly saying they're not opposed to it, or the majority of them are not opposed to it. They just want some sort of compromise. I think that's what the supervisor is trying to do engineering work and trying to make it somehow that it shouldn't affect the neighbors and that everyone should be happy. And that's why he's supervised.
Is it possible one of the suggestions was moving these houses forward? The first thing that comes to mind is it gets in the way of the emergency access and the parking.
That building,
But-
again, is closer to Temple Bethel and has
That's
less
true.
capacity.
But maybe what the board is asking is if the building could move forward. I would have to put some parking back there, and maybe just because the building proximity to the property line, maybe the neighbors find that
You mean
more
to
acceptable.
swap the building and the parking on that?
Something along the lines. I think that might be able to
That would
work.
move the building even further. It would almost make it disappear.
That's
It wouldn't deal with
not quite,
parking,
but
playground.
yeah, that might do it. But that's really a site plan issue, isn't it? Like,
Well, you see, if you did that, just go with me, you wouldn't be taking down any more trees. You'd still have the tree buffer, but when the trees didn't have leaves on them, you wouldn't be looking at a building. You'd be looking at through the trees and then a parking lot area.
I don't know if that's the optimal way to do it. We have a commitment that we will work with the planning board, and to the extent that we can work with the neighbors, to come up with a screening device that will provide appropriate screening.
It's a great try, Ira. It's a great try, and that you're the attorney, and it's a great attempt right there. But I think it's clear that I'm speaking for myself, but what the kind of by osmosis I'm getting from the board is that we're going to want to see some kind of compromise and put some kind of constraints, I think, going toward the planning board. And if it can be that building, as you just said, Lenny, was put where that parking is, and the parking were flip-flopped there, it would make a big difference. That person on the reverse P, he would not see the building at all, or much more minimally.
You mentioned a very good point. I mean, they do have. I mean, I don't want them to knock off the parking, but they do have 24 extra spots. So even if they lose 5 or 6. Not too many, but if they lose 5 or 6, it doesn't really affect the whole
So
project.
I believe that we should be pushing those 4 buildings in the back, 2 that are at the center of the cul-de-sac up another 10 or 12 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ones on the corners, especially in the southwest corner, which has the closest juxtapositioning to the back neighborhood, that would be flip-flop with the parking.
Actually,
I get the concept.
Actually, this has, there's a lot of woods back here. This is no closer than any other building.
But it does to the Zabriskie there on the reverse P neighborhood there. The person that spoke was speaking specifically of that southwest. Matter of fact, Lenny colored them in.
The next one is over here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How many bedrooms are these units, Ira?
This one.
How many bedrooms?
I don't know.
I don't know. How many bedrooms? 4 bedrooms.
I think you understand, what constraints I want to put upon this. I want obviously the planning board to continue working on screening of that nature, but pushing it forward into where those parking lot areas are and keeping more trees in the back would make, I think, a little bit more sense for the neighbors in the rear. And flip-flopping that parking and looking to put, when you flip-flop it, looking to put in a small playground there. I think Mr. Ullman made that point there.
Well, again, with respect to the playground.
And lose some of that parking.
With respect to the playground, Mr. Ullman's not here, and with all respect to Mr. Ullman, okay, there's really no need for a playground here. Each of these units, each of these homes is going to have its own backyard. The idea of putting in a playground, it's just not necessary. It's not going to be used. It's not going to be well maintained. Eventually, it's just going to be an eyesore. People will prefer to have their children play in their own backyards or go to one of the town parks. To put a swing set back there is just, frankly, it's just throwing out money and wasting money.
Then it could just be open space then with trees that would give further buffering that would be.
I don't know how we
major
could.
concern there.
I don't know how we could do it without losing the unit count.
Well, you'd have to move it into that parking area and lose the parking count.
We'd lose
move
parking.
Move that back to the one in the southwest corner, Ira, that one, and just move it to the north.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that would move it to the north. That would move it 50-some feet. That would give that southwest corner 35 or 85-foot buffer there, and then the other buildings could be moved up, and that would give those a 48-foot buffer.
I think it's possible. We would lose parking.
Well, as Mr. Ullman said, you have a lot of extra parking now.
Mhm.
And where is that parking, to answer
The parking, to answer the question, I was eventually going to get to it, is in front of all the units. There are parking areas in front of each unit. Most of them have, well, they have anywhere from anywhere from two parking spaces on this building here, up to 12 parking spaces over here. 4, 5, 6. There's plenty of, the parking is right in front of each of the units.
So the parking meets more than the code, so if you lost that parking there and flip-flop that building there, it would
We do have extra parking. Under code, we certainly could reduce some of the parking. Again, you need to have the parking near where the units are. So we can't just eliminate these parking areas completely.
Correct. You may have to have some parking in the front of the cul-de-sac there, correct?
Just curious, where the garbage displays go?
You know what? I asked that question this afternoon when we were meeting and preparing for this. There's these little boxes at the back of each building, okay, and that's where the garbage enclosure is.
I was wondering what those boxes were.
Yep, that's what I was wondering too.
Does that cul-de-sac allow buses to come in there, school buses, or would the kids be picked up on Viola?
I'm not sure whether the school decides where to pick up the kids, but it certainly can handle the turn. It can handle a fire truck.
It's a 50-foot radius.
Okay, so then it meets the school requirement.
It meets your public road requirements.
Yep.
It meets the fire apparatus status?
Yes,
on the code?
absolutely.
Yep, and as long as we're talking about that, and we mentioned the emergency road, the emergency access will come through the parking lot.
Of Temple Bethel.
Of Temple Bethel, and there'll be a connecting drive here. This shows 2 gates. There'll actually only be 1 gate near the property line on the development side that will be governed by a Knox box.
Now, let me ask a question. Is that where that push gate would be? Is that that will be a controlled lock device by emergency service?
Absolutely.
Their landscape? Yeah. And they agreed that it won't be left open to be a cut-through for...
Temple Bethel doesn't want it as a cut-through. The developer doesn't want it as a cut-through. It won't be used as a cut-through.
Okay, I know Mr. Fleisch wanted to respond there, as long as it's not a response to anything Mr. Grossman said, because nothing he said was really that bad, and it doesn't need to, you know.
I wasn't going there. I just wanted to raise one point. At the planning board meeting, the planning board chairman had strongly encouraged the development team to meet with the neighbors and to do this exact exercise that you're doing here tonight before we came here. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So my question to you, to the town board is there an opportunity for us to sit together offline, not at this hearing, to work things out so we can come back?
I think what the process is, and Mr. Speck, tell me about it, but when we close the public hearing and we vote upon this zone change, which we said we were going to do tonight, we can put in there the constraints that we want, that we've just identified. The planning board has the ability to put in further constraints, and that process should be done with the planning board, and it can continue, but this will change the envelope so that they won't be able to go into those areas, and I'll reiterate when I vote as to what those constraints that I have about moving those buildings up and moving them away from the neighborhood to the south. And the planning board would have the ability to go even further or to do other things, but they would not be able to backtrack on what our conditions were.
So in other words, if you vote tonight, it may be with certain conditions that in addition...
If we vote, it will be with conditions.
Okay.
And then does this need any variances?
It will need variances.
So you're talking about 3 more, so there's 3 more meetings that have to approve this. There's a planning board, zoning board, planning board. 3 more different separate public hearings that have to approve, and they could put restrictions, and they do a lot of times put a lot of restrictions on it.
All right,
So there will be more chances for the public to meet and to have public hearings and to meet with the other boards.
So when you talk about restrictions, so you're talking about, so the setback of 35 feet is required, you could say, in addition to that, we want a certain number of footage for a buffer that would stay there, and then just...
You said 45, I went to 48.
Okay. so an additional area, and then from at that point, we had further opportunities at
And in
the...
the southwest corner, another 50, because we would push that building over.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. The public hearing's open, so anybody will be able to comment.
Can I just say something before the next speaker comes up? Come on up, ma'am. Is that I actually I've been on this board for 3 years, and I actually appreciate the process, the give and take with Mr. Manuel's presentation, the people who live the neighborhood. It's probably one of the first times enjoying the give and take, and it's been quite
refreshing. It's
refreshing instead of just hammering it out and one side's it and that's all. I do appreciate the people that are opposing it, the willingness to work with your neighbors. I do appreciate Temple Bethel trying to keep a great religious institution into the neighborhood. That when I was growing up with many of the people around here. In fact, I want to recognize one of my teachers. Wendy Witt is here, and I could tell you she was one of my teachers, and I'm sitting on this board because of some of her influence on me many years ago. There has been a lot of
still waiting for that influence to shine.
There has been many changes, and Chris could tell you this because Chris and I are probably the most two dedicated people from the area suffering our whole lives. There have been many changes, and Wendy could say that they raised their children in this area too. I mean, I remember riding my bike up to Stella's Deli, and there was an issue with traffic or anything like that, but there have been changes. I wanted to say to the people that oppose this, I do like what I see, what they're offering. I will try to with this board's influence, try to compromise and everything, but I also don't want to try to hurt anyone here. It's a difficult line, and Mr. Gleichman said, the planning board's sending us a message. Well, I mean, that's easy for them to do. And we have to lead and be the leaders here and make decisions up here. But I do want to tell everyone in this audience, I've been on this board for 3 years, and I do appreciate every one of you exercising your constitutional right, and it's been a nice dialogue back and forth. I'm very proud of everyone. I'm very proud to be on this board for what I've seen tonight and how everybody's conducted themselves. Thank you.
So in that spirit, you have the floor.
Good evening. My name is Susan Strauss. I live at 8 Zabriskie Terrace with my husband, Jeff. We moved here in 1980, so you could say we're pretty old-timers to the area. In fact, we were the first family, other than the original owners of Zabriskie Terrace, to move into the neighborhood, and surely it's changed over the years. A couple of points I wanted to make. I hope that this doesn't turn into a controversy, whether it's Orthodox versus non-Orthodox.
Exactly.
It should not come to that. It has nothing to do with that as far as I'm concerned, as far as my husband is concerned. I taught in Reuben Gittleman Day School for over 30 years. A lot of fine people I know from Temple Bethel. It has nothing to do with that. We've had good relationships. We've had no relationships with Temple Bethel, but in a positive way. So they have every right to sell their property. What I do take offense to is just referring to us as the neighbors. We are the neighbors in flesh. We are the people who lived here since 1980. We are the ones who have paid our taxes and raised our kids here and bought in this area because we have our privacy. I understand if developments go up. Come Saturday afternoon, I'm in my bedroom, I hear the band from Ramapo High School as if they were under my bed. I hear the football games as if they were in my room. I have no right to complain because that's what it is, okay? The sound bounces right off our house. I'd like to find some way where perhaps some kind of a barrier, a sound barrier, can be instituted into this development, because I can only imagine if this is the kind of noise I hear from Ramapo High School, which is on the other side of the road, and mind you, our house is one of the two homes with Mr. Gleich that's abutting this development, what it's going to be like. Now, to say that traffic isn't going to get impacted, we'd have to be idiots to believe that. We know what it's like now. I know that I'll go around the entire Muncie rather than have to go down 306 to do anything, let alone worry about an ambulance trying to get through that road. Now, I can only imagine how much harder it's going to be then. And we'll wait for some serious accident to happen and say, this wasn't a good idea. Think of ways that's not going to increase the problems we have now, but decrease them. Okay? We've been good neighbors. We've done our share. And I'm just pleading to the town board to take ownership and show us that you care about the small landowner that's been here, even though there's a bigger picture out there. Show us that you care about us also. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strauss. And, just so you know, we have moved a lot of those football games up to the St. Lawrence Center in Hilburn on Saturdays, because they play now, I think, 4 of their home games there at the St. Lawrence Center.
That's why I slept better lately.
Maybe you're sleeping better on Shabbos, on the Sabbath. But you make a very good point, and I've made this point before about the traffic. The C's and the F's, and in this case they're C's and A's. In some areas they're F's. When you add traffic to them, yes, there's more traffic, but as the gentleman said, there are less members at Temple Bethel, and that takes some traffic off of the roads. But traffic does increase, and we try to come up with ways to ameliorate that by having better turning signals, as we did on Viola Road. We're going into every intersection in this town, and we're installing a new technology at every traffic light in the town of Ramapo. And the deputy supervisors are leading the charge on this, and we've already passed a bond for $900,000 to have the money to do this, so that every ambulance and police car and fire truck will have an apparatus and a button that they will be able to go when they come to an intersection, hit a button, and it will put the lights red in the 3 opposing directions, and it will only stay green in the direction that the vehicle is traveling. It will get ambulances quicker to homes and quicker to the hospital, and it'll be safer going through those intersections, because it's dangerous, because a lot of people are either texting or have their headphones on when they're driving and they don't even hear the siren sometimes. So it's important to have that visual apparatus. But when it comes to the point that I think it was Devorah that made it about driving down 306 toward 59 through Kaiser, and how it's changed, and yes, it has changed. That's a village, and they have their own zoning board there. And when there are buses and people say, you get behind a bus, if you're behind a bus, you have to wait. And when I get behind buses, and I've said this before, I'll use a Jewish word. It's nachas. It's a blessing to see the young kids getting on school buses. Yeah, we have to wait, but we have a lot of young kids in the town, and it's a growing community, and there are times when the traffic is bad. There are other times it's not as bad. But if an intersection is a C and it's going to stay a C, it doesn't mean that it's great, but it means that it's not having that incredible impact. Mr. Strauss made that point, and I heard it very clearly that traffic is bad already. Traffic's a lot different than it was a long time ago, but it's not impossible. Mr. Foreman said when he gets to that light and he goes straight up to Ramapo College, I know that intersection. That traffic dissipates right there, going up there to Union Road. So traffic is not my concern in this particular project. My concern has always been the homes that were to the south of this project, and to those homeowners. And so I'll let people. It's a public hearing, so I'll let the public
I just have
speak.
a real quick question to Mr. Jackson. What's the angle of sight if you're standing on one of the 4 units on the 2nd floor? If someone's on the 2nd floor of those 4 units in the back, these 4 units, what's the angle of sight from their houses? If they're about 45 feet away.
I'm sure you can see that cross section.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Yehudis Abramowitz, 6 Zabriskie Terrace. I'm one of the 4 houses that
We've
abut
been
the back
discussing,
of the
yep.
property in question. I don't really want to talk to the specifics of the project, but kind of just pull back and look at the global issue. I see the temple that's needing to sell their property in order to raise funds. And the way that they can get the most for that property is to sell to a builder that will build the largest number of units on that property. I see a builder who's buying a piece of property, and of course he's not in it for charity. He wants to make as much money as he can and build the most dense project that he can, so he'll sell all the houses and make a lot of money. So we have money for the temple, we have money for the builder, and then we have something called quality of life of the neighbors in the neighborhood. I think the town, in its wisdom, zoned that area R25 for a very good reason. And if we all kind of pull back, if the temple is willing to sell to a builder who will build 11 units there instead of 44, and if, the builder will, everybody has to kind of pull back a little bit in order to maintain the quality of our town. And we see it changing on the main roads. But I think this picture is really very telling. Everyone says that the project will not impact the neighborhood. But if you look at the neighborhood, here you have this building, A building here, and then this extremely dense project, a house here, a house here, a house here.
And your house is right there in the corner?
My house is right there in the corner.
So the
That's
one
my
on the
house.
southwest corner, that?
Yes, that's my house. And I'm concerned that, not for this particular neighborhood so much, but just but for the entire town of Muncie. We see this as another step in the direction of Brooklyn, if you mind. But mostly, it's really for the whole town. I'm not concerned about my property per se. I'm not concerned about noise. I'm not concerned about traffic. But the quality of the town, the quality of our life in this town is definitely, definitely changing. When you crowd so many people, thank God our families are big. If we're talking about 44 units, we could be talking about 440 people in an area, in a
If we were so
tiny little
lucky.
area.
I feel that's how I feel.
I mean-
I thought I made that clear in my last statement.
So I think that, we really need to respect the wisdom of those who came before us and zoned the property the way it really was supposed to be, and to keep the character of our town.
Thank you very much.
Can I, just real quick, Mr. Supervisor, can I ask the attorney, Mr. Manuel, a question? You stated before to the board and to the public that at our current zone, what we're currently zoned for, can you go back to that statement where you made, like, what possibly could do there? It wasn't really a threat, but it was what you also...
No, it was not a threat at all.
But you could actually go higher, based on the zone right now.
We could go to the height limitation is exactly the same in the MR8 and the R25.
They could put a yeshiva with 200 dormitories on that property by right.
I didn't want to say that.
Well, you could.
Under our law.
Without any zone
because that would be considered a threat by some people.
You're
But yes, you're absolutely right.
Parameters are on.
You're absolutely right. That could be done
Without any variance.
with a dormitory.
Without even coming to us.
That's
you'd
correct.
have to put but you basically under
That
our
is absolutely correct.
Okay. Any next speaker?
I would like to, Mr. St. Lawrence, one of the advantages of having an engineer as experienced and talented as Mr. Jackson is that he can draw on the fly. So we did listen very carefully to what you had to say. We'd like to be able to respond to that if we
Glad to
could.
hear it, and then Devore can speak again. Go for a third bite at the apple.
Site distance,
Marty?
this is a cross-section, and it shows the existing homes in sections A and B, and your question was, why can't you see from the upper story of the building, see the existing house? And I just drew a sight line from a window to a window, approximately. And if there were a tree that's approximately 20 feet or so at the property line, it would block it.
Thank you.
Okay.
There was another thing I did while we were doing some homework.
I wanted to do that so that people could hear.
Sure.
And I'll hold.
Thank you. I took a quick look at the alternative plan that we had prepared. This plan actually shows the 35-foot setback plus an additional 10 feet from the property line.
Okay.
So we have a 45-foot setback because we anticipated we would plant or supplement the existing trees along the property line. Your suggestion was, why don't we take the two end buildings, which would be this number and this is 17 and 20, could we move them forward? The answer is, I could take this 45-foot from the property line and increase it by, let's say, 20 feet, which would make it 65 feet. That would put these buildings...
Our last speaker, who's right there on that southwest corner, it would go from
Correct.
presently 35 to 65.
Right, now that's, the house is here.
Right.
And so the distance, by the way, this is, I should have grabbed the scale, it's about 120 feet. You could add another 20 feet to it.
120 feet from her back.
Maybe a little more.
Okay.
A little more.
Currently, on this drawing, it's about 120.
Yeah.
So it would be more than that.
So if I move this building forward, and I could do the same thing over here,
So in the northeast corner, you can move that to...
I can move them, and in which case you would have...
I mean, southeast, right.
So you would have an area for planting, and leave the existing trees, plant some additional trees to take care of your screening suggestion, and then move the buildings forward, and then
the
you...
whole project up, and in some cases, you're moving it up 65 feet. So if you took that 1,400 feet you were talking about before, and the rear lot line, it would be, the first 400 feet would be up 65 feet, and then it'd be 45 feet, and the last 400 would be another 65 feet up.
I was lost at that 1,400 feet, by the way. Let's all raise, anybody who knows what the 1,400 feet is, raise their hand. I don't know what that is. I think it has to do with the P-shaped neighborhood.
So you could, you would increase that in the corner lots by going from 35 to 65?
That's correct. That's correct.
And the other ones, you'd be going?
Now 40, they're 45. 45, yeah.
And with some additional plantings behind the entire back portion?
Correct.
Okay.
We'd lose some parking spaces, but we can afford to lose some parking spaces.
You'd only lose about 12, right? I mean, you could still park on the other side. You're still gonna have the parking on the other.
And that's something you could deal with the planning board and the zoning board too as well.
12 units, right?
12 parking
This is
spaces.
where it worked.
Okay.
Thank you, Ira.
Sure.
Anybody else in the public who would like to speak, come right up.
You can have my mic.
I'm learning a lot as I'm standing here today. I just was handed a little while ago one of the diagrams, which are not being shown this direction, everything's this direction. So Daniel Gleischer has been really great and helpful in our community. Okay, you guys have them, now we do. He's not an official representative, which it made it sound like with the whole conversation that the other gentleman brought up.
That's all right.
He's been very... Okay, he's been very kind to help and organize and stuff, but he's not an official representative. But what I think is rather misleading, and I think the word, the Brooklynization, the crowding, just the bulk, the density of people that's going on here, is this picture looks very serene. And all you folks, you lovely people, I grew up Reformed too, by the way. I know where you're coming. But you're not living in this area with these kind of developments. You're living probably in beautiful single-family homes, which is what we have here. Maybe not all of you. Maybe not all of you. Maybe not all of you. I don't know. I can't make assumptions. But when you don't live... Pardon? Okay. I take back just who... Some are and some aren't. Some may, who knows. But this looks very serene.
One-person show. Go ahead.
Okay. What I saw in this, and now when I come up here, clearly I see, what's in front of each house are 6 parking places. And that's the kind of development. And some of these, it says it's a 2-unit place, and yet there's 6 parking places in front of those homes. So don't most homes that we know have a garage? Or maybe someone has 1 car parking space in front of their house, or 2, but 6 in front of each double one? That's just, this is the kind of development, the kind of homes that have been developed around the area. Now maybe if I'm mistaken, people are shaking their head kind of no, but I am seeing here now that I've come closer, 3 on each side, 3 parking places, and that is the design that is all over. And those are places where children sometimes end up playing in that. I've driven down and seen you kind of hold your breath as you drive up these streets, praying to God that a little kid on his little bike doesn't come out with all the cars. but there isn't playroom. This is going to be extremely dense. When you're talking 4 bedrooms, I know the size of the families, that can mean 3 kids to a bedroom, that can probably be 10 people per house, which you're talking about 440 to 500 people living in this little development. Now, on Viola Road, farther down toward Union, there was a development that happened that has 2 units on it. I think they might each be 2, but they look like 2 homes. It's very beautifully done, much more in accordance with the area. And I think that is very much more what is in line with what the community is about and what this area's been zoned for. I'm not for the rezoning if you can get it. I'm not saying you guys shouldn't make and have as much money as your synagogue needs. You should be blessed with all the money and everything you need, and people should give from their hearts and their pockets generously to give your synagogue all the money it needs. But I think and you're doing your job, and everyone's doing what they're here for, but I think people's focus is really on what their own self-interest is, and not necessarily on what's good for the greater good of what area. And that's really what the focus has to be, is what's for the better good. And yes, the area does need more housing, but to sacrifice, and who's to say that down the road now, wow, this variance was made or this rezoning happened, so now there's some other developer, let me buy up 2 homes together, and I'm going to also cram on another 44 units. And it's going to, just like it's happening.
Who knows that someday that the people, yourself, may say, geez, we want it to be 25A.
I don't know. I just think that, like you said, there was a vision that people were talking about, this planning that was done years back, the way things were divided up, the way that the area where people bought in and developed this in a way that is in accordance with that. But 44 units with 6 parking places, some of them I think had 4, the ones back in the back, but 6 parking places, it means it's going to look like a Brooklyn park, just like all these other developments are. It's very dense, very crowded, and it's not right.
Thank you
Just
very
want to
much.
add that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your time.
Anybody else who wants to speak? Really, Robert? Yes. Come right up.
I just want to bring to the attention of the board, as the MR8 zones, the way I understood and the way I read it, it's multifamily residential, up to 8 units per acre. So this board could cut that down to 7, 6, or 5, or whatever it feels necessary. It doesn't have to be 8 units per acre, as I understand your zoning law.
Thank you, Mr. Romanowski. Okay. One more speaker, or are we done? Okay. A motion to close the public hearing? Moved by Councilwoman Ohm. Oh, no. Really? Okay. Before we close the public hearing, Brenda, go right ahead. No, go. No, you should be in the public hearing. Right.
Yes,
be part of the
it
record.
should be in the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just have a couple of comments from all the speakers, and having spent 6 years on the planning board, I do have the vision to kind of see what the end result is. Mr. Emmanuel alluded to sometimes that's difficult, but when you look at maps for 6 years, you begin to see what it can really look like and how difficult or how easy it could be. 2 questions, though. I just wanted to know, how far is it from the actual building, let's say 17, 18, 19, to the actual neighbor's house? We keep talking about property line. What's the distance from one house to the other house? I don't think that...
They mentioned that. You said it's about 100.
120.
If they move it more, it'll be 120.
If they move
It's
it
over
more,
100.
right.
Now it's over 100.
Based on the
Go ahead, Irene.
recent
Go ahead,
change.
go ahead.
Is that correct, 120?
According to the map that's prepared by Mr. Jackson's office, it is 90 feet from the back of Mr. Gleich's house with the addition to the property line.
Okay.
And it is 128 feet from, I believe it's Mr. Strauss's house, Mr. and Mrs. Strauss's house, to the property line.
Okay. And that's the 2, the farthest.
Those are the 2.
Okay. You would add on, right, that was my point.
Those are the 2.
So you add on.
So basically 90 and 128.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, this is a very good-looking project. It is not an eyesore, and we have some projects from past, way past, that may be considered that. But this is a beautiful project. You see the rendering, and we welcome those kind of projects in the town. We want them to to look as nice as they are. I am a housing advocate, and I believe that if you make the units also affordable, and some of the residents here, you have beautiful homes and maybe you can afford them. We have quite a few people who cannot afford what you have. So to have something like this is a blessing for them. And it is more of an upscale affordable housing. Oftentimes affordable is considered low-income housing, but this is not. These are condos. So I want you to take into consideration the people who need housing who can't afford the type of house and land that you have. I think that we have an opportunity to modify our master plan as we continue to grow. I don't have all the answers for that, but I do know that we go according to our population and we try to accommodate everyone for housing. If you don't have a house to live, you technically really don't have anything. As far as the buffer's concerned, to maintain the mature trees is, I think, the way we should go. We should add some shrubs, screening, privacy, especially for the existing housing, to make sure that they're not disturbed at all. But given the numbers that Mr. Emmanuel gave, and I'm sorry it's out of order, but I'm going according to the speakers, I think that that would be quite sufficient if we have the mature trees and the shrubs and a decent screening. We need to ensure the safety of the cars coming out into the road. A lot of people talked about traffic. And because I travel that road every single day, and we have two things going on. Mr. Foreman talked about the high school. Well, he's absolutely correct. The only time you have really problems on that road is when RCC is having something at the college. Other than that, the traffic flows pretty well on that block. Now, you do have another school on the other side, Kakiak Elementary. And those flow of traffics for the schools, the suggestion is on another school back in Hempstead, they have signs that indicate when the buses are released from the school. I think it's a great idea to say school buses 2:15 to 3:15. That lets the motorists know, or the neighbors know, when those buses will be released from the school. So if you can plan an alternative time to not travel that road, you know, because I know, the buses from Ramapo are actually leaving at 2:15. So I'm not going to go down that road. But I know within a half an hour, I'm able to travel the road. And I think that that would be a help if we could have some signs, small signs at some location that indicates when the buses are active, as well as the elementary school. This project is going to provide a balance and an unselfish one, because one of the things that we talked about was a synagogue, a dormitory. What if the temple decided to sell the property to someone, all 11 acres? Then you'd have no control. I think what they're trying to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to put something there that will help them to survive. They want to, let me see, I had a lot of notes here, hold on. They're trying to survive financially, and they're also trying to continue the spirituality of Temple Bethel, the legacy that I heard Miss Billy talk about and some other people talk about how important this is for the community to continue to have what I call their church. And everyone needs that, because this is what our country is built on. So we start with the rabbi, we start with the pastor, we start with the priest. And this is a continuum of a change of time for this temple. So they're trying to grow, but be responsible in trying to do something or figure out how to do it so that the neighbors are happy, so that they can provide a service to their community, and so that they can survive. So I think that those are the things that, as town board members, we're responsible to help our constituents, our tax-paying people, our neighbors, to live. Because if they can't do anything, they certainly will, it will be to their demise. And I don't think that we want that in the town of Ramapo. And lastly, the planning board made no negative comment. I know a few people said something about the planning board. They didn't make a negative recommendation. They didn't make any recommendation, but they didn't make a negative one, because oftentimes, if having sit on the planning board, we sit on the fence on a project when we're really not sure what to do. So we look to the town board to give us the guidance. And the town board oftentimes will come down with a suggestion, just as the supervisor and deputy supervisor and Councilman Ullman says, we want to tweak it, we want to change it, but it will be modified as it goes along. So I want to say that I think that this is a good project. I'm very proud of Temple Beth Ellen trying to be very responsible. It has been a while since we've had a great project. It is a great project, and I think that we should consider there was a gentleman over here said they're good neighbors. Everybody here is a good neighbor. It's the best meeting that we've had in a long time when it comes to people that don't necessarily agree, but I think that this meeting shows that we can compromise. So if we can tweak the units, I think that we should definitely favor this project and move forward.
I appreciate your comments, and I'm very glad that we were able to get those on the record because I think they were very good.
Thank you.
And I'm very proud of your comments, actually. Motion to adjourn, to close the public hearing, moved by Deputy Supervisor Withers, second by Councilman Ullman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimously. On the main motion here, there's some housekeeping, Mr. Speck, we'd have to do, and that is to have a negative declaration.
That's correct, Your Honor.
That's all right. That's all right. I'll answer to that.
John Lang is our town's planning consultant. He's present tonight. He's prepared a negative declaration for the board. I have it here. I could summarize it.
Yes.
It states that based upon the reasoning below and review of the information in the narrative summary, the environmental assessment forms, and the project site plans, the Town of Ramapo Town Board is lead agency for the proposed action, hereby finds that the proposal will not have a significant and adverse impact on the environment and that no environmental impact statement need be prepared. The name of the action is Viola Estates Proposed Zone Change from R25 to MR8, and it's an unlisted type action.
Moved by?
Is this the actual zone change or is the
This is
declaration?
the Moved by?
Logan?
Councilwoman Logan, second by Deputy Supervisor Withers. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimously. And now on the main motion, it's for the zone change. I would like to incorporate the statements that we made, and if anybody else has additional points, then they could add on to, and that would be to make a motion for the zone change with the conditions that the properties in the rear on the southeast and the southwest portions of the property are moved up from the present 35 feet to 65 feet, and that the other two units along the back are moved up from 35 to 45. That would accomplish what you had talked, that would put the housing, I think Mr. Gleisch said about 135 from his house, and the Strausses of 193 feet from their house. So those would be the conditions, along with additional screening and trees and screening and fencing that the planning board would find appropriate. Those were my conditions, and any other conditions?
I want to add one condition, obviously besides yours, and Michael told me if this is legal to do in a zone change, is that before any C of Os are issued, there has to be $25,000 put in escrow that cannot be released until the trees are built and all the screenings and all the bushes and everything that's built according to the ARB or the planning board or whatever the recommendations are.
I don't see any problem.
But it needs to be put in that it cannot be released by anybody until it's done.
Okay.
Councilman Friedman? So an escrow of $25,000.
Which it needs to be put in, they don't have to put in right away. I know there's some upfront costs, but before any C of Os are issued on the property, that they need to have $25,000 in escrow to ensure that.
Or have done the work.
Or done the work,
the actual,
obviously, which is the best.
Okay.
Do you want to add additional trees?
Well, I think Councilman Freeman, do you want additional trees?
I think the ARB should do that.
Okay, yeah, well, obviously, I think there should be enough so that the issue raised by Councilman Owen and the issue talked about privacy in terms of being able to see that there are sufficient trees that there is just no question and no doubt that nobody can ever see into any homes or into the private areas of people's residences.
Okay.
This actually leads us with the ARB issue, that we have to change the ARB issue because it's going to affect this project as well. The ARB coming before and after.
Yeah,
We'll
the
do that after.
ARB
We'll
really
address
should
that
be after projects are done.
Correct, not before. And this is going to affect this. We should do this after.
Yeah. Any other conditions? I think we have met our conditions at.
No, I just on the motion when we vote.
Second it?
I'll second it, but on the motion, I want to make a statement.
Then you have the floor.
Um,
You're
I-
moving it, second it for
Yeah.
it, so you have the floor.
I just want to reiterate what I said before. I'm very proud of everyone here today. But some of the difficult decisions we have to make sitting on this board is sometimes we have to lead and make decisions that maybe don't seem to be in your favor. What I want to say is that I'm in favor of the project, and I agree to the compromises that have been made today. I want to say to the yeshiva, to the Temple Bethel, and its developer, I'm very proud, in fact, because I feel like the vote we're going to take and being in favor is that we are protecting you folks, because there is a very powerful federal law out there that many people that are involved in government on day-to-day operations, that they have the right to do something pretty damaging, and you can't take it back, and you can't fight the federal government as much as easy as you think you can. So I want to commend everyone here. I want to commend the Temple Bethel and doing the right thing. We're going to protect the taxpayers. We're going to have taxes on the rolls. That's going to help the school district. We have an assistant principal there. They desperately need the money, and I just don't want you folks to think that your feelings or your comments did not go unheard. They did go heard. We heard everything. We heard both sides, but sometimes we have to make compromises, and I believe that's what happened today. If you don't feel that way, I apologize, but I do believe that we're going to make the right decision, and I'm in favor of going forward and voting for yes on this.
Yes.
Just before you vote, as you know, there was an adverse GML review by the county, which requires a supermajority vote to override. If you're going to vote, to approve, I would recommend that part of the motion also include that you're specifically overriding the GML.
Okay.
Don't we need a roll call?
We will do it by a roll call,
Yeah, yeah.
and just for that reason, that one of the conditions is overriding the county for the supermajority on the GML. And so we'll ask our clerk.
I just wanted to say, can I
Yeah,
add something?
Sure,
Yeah,
sure,
just
go right ahead.
I've spoken enough, so I'll do it quick. Three quick issues. Just wanted to make it clear, I know my vote, I'm pretty positive that the town board's vote. The temple keeps on bringing up finances. The zone change is not done because of finances. Obviously, we want to help the temple, but the zone change is done strictly because of need. There's no zone change that's done. I believe the law doesn't allow a zone change to be done because of financial interest. And we're looking at the overall picture, as Deputy Supervisor is saying, trying to balance the needs of the community versus the neighbors, and that's why we made those conditions. The second thing is I want to address the county GML that you mentioned. I've yet to see any project in the town of Ramapo, whether it's a regular permit that someone's doing in their house to do an extension, to adding on a porch, to making a garage, that the county planning board approves. I've yet to see that. The same project in other counties, there's enough water and there's enough sewer, but for some reason Ramapo there isn't. To add on to Councilwoman Logan regarding our planning board, New York state law clearly states that a town board makes its own change, not a planning board, even though they didn't vote. And our planning board's not shy to vote down stuff, and they vote down stuff all the time. The ultimate zone change is by the town board for a simple reason, is because there is political ramifications, and the town board is elected, and they have to answer to the people.
It's a legislative act.
Correct, and that's why it's done by the thing. Just one more thing about this Brooklynization. Maybe I'm going to regret it, but I think it's something important to say. I grew up in California also. I don't know if you know my family. Not that big of a community there, but I did grow up in California. My family still lives there. I actually lived in Borough Park for a while.
Brooklyn envy? Is that
I lived in Borough Park a while, and I actually moved to here, Borough Park, part of Brooklyn. Demographics change. I'm not saying necessarily they're always positive or that's something that we always like, but demographics do change. If you look at, I'm Orthodox. If you follow my community, it's been from the Lower East Side to Crown Heights to Brooklyn. Things change. When I lived in Brooklyn, my entire block was two-family houses. Now, 2 stories. Now every single house is 4, and they even have this trick now. They make an attic to make it like 4.5 stories. Demographics change, and yes, we all want to live in a suburban area, and Muncie's still suburban compared to Brooklyn, but things change, and Muncie's changing. It's not the same when I moved there 10 years ago, and it's not the same, well, it's already 12. It's not the same when I'm sure some people moved there in the 1980s. Demographics change, and that was the supervisor's vision always with the master plan. I wasn't here with the master plan, was to keep the center of Muncie high density, and the suburbs a little bit more with open space and lower density. Muncie is growing, and that's what's going to happen. This high density area is going to eventually expand slowly but surely and become more density based on what the demographics need. We had the Watchtower looking to come here. They might, then they're not coming here, but they might have had their needs, and we worked with them at that time to custom, it was what
They're
Jehovah's
moving
Witness.
into suffering.
And now they're moving to suffering. And we try to do each demographics as whether it's the Orthodox community or any community moves along and changes, so too the zone changes have to change to reflect that diversity or that group. Thank you.
Well, Los Angeles' loss is our gain.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Okay, so do you want to move that with the, before we
Yes.
vote on the GML, for your comments being incorporated in the resolution as well? Okay, moved by Councilman Holman, second by Deputy Supervisor Withers. On the main motion, I'll ask our clerk to call the roll.
Councilman Ullman.
Yes.
Councilman Friedman.
Yes.
Councilwoman Logan.
Yes.
Councilman Withers.
Yes.
Supervisor St. Lawrence.
Yes. Okay, so it passes unanimously. I want to thank everybody for this process. It's been a little bit like making sausage, but I think in the end, I think we'll all be in great shape. Thank you all very much for coming. And we have another public hearing. Believe it or not, we have another public hearing. If you want to stay for the second public hearing, you're welcome, or you can leave. We'll start the next public hearing in 5 minutes.
Okay.
And while do you know if you were very No, we're going to do. She stopped.
Okay.
You just announced that we're.
We're going to reopen the public hearing. Is Pat? Where'd Pat go?
Pat, by the way, was not here for the first hearing.
Oh, okay.
So
it's okay. Then let's reopen. Here he comes. Okay, so we'll reopen the public hearing on our next. All the publications have been made for tonight for the public hearing.
They were made initially,
And,
so simply an
anybody from the public that would like to speak? Mr. Romanowski?
Yeah, before that, Mr. Supervisor, I'd just like to read into the record, there
Okay.
were a number of other exhibits that have been received, which should be deemed part of the record. Since our last hearing, we had 13 exhibits on June 12th. The additional exhibits are as follows. Number 14 will be a memorandum of John Lang of F.P. Clark Associates dated 6/19/13. Number 15 will be a letter of Michael Galanti of F.P. Clark Associates dated 6/21/13 regarding traffic issues.
And that answered the questions that were brought up at the original public hearing.
That plus the submissions by the applicant did, yes.
Okay.
Number 16 is a traffic analysis of Ronald Ryman of Mazer Consulting dated June 18th, 2013. Number 17 is a memorandum of John T. Collins, P.E., dated 6/25/13 with attached traffic reports.
Okay.
Number 18 is an EAF Part 2 prepared by John Lang of F.P. Clark Associates. Number 19 is a tax analysis by Ira Emanuel Esquire dated July 8th, 2013. And finally is accident data incorporated in a letter by R. Ryman of Mazer Consulting dated 7/10/13.
Okay, very good. With all those submitted into the record, the public hearing is again open, and come right up, state your name and address, and you'll have the floor.
It's Robert Romanowski, 183 Maple Avenue, Muncie. On the last public hearing, a number of people spoke on this issue of the zone change on the Route 59 between Augusta Avenue and the Wells Fargo Bank. And what I'm asking the board, the people gave a lot of good reasons, the residents of that area, as to why they don't want this zone change. And if you remember, the last meeting, one person spoke in favor of the zone change, while all the others were opposed to it. And the ones that were opposed gave a lot of good reasons as to why they were opposed. But I'm asking the board to approve this zone change, and for the best reason of all was that the majority of the people don't want it. And for that reason, this board should not approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romanowski.
Mr. Supervisor, at the last meeting, we asked Mr. Emanuel, on behalf of the petitioner, to return at the continued date and answer a number of questions that the board proposed. I think he's willing to do that now in a rather succinct manner.
Okay, and I would like to note that on the new submissions that were put in by Mr. Emanuel and Mr. Galanti and Mr. Lang did address a lot of the questions that were brought up as to the traffic accidents, to the traffic flow, and things that were brought up in the last meeting. So I'm glad that those were answered, and including the analysis of the tax study. So you have the floor. I know you've given a long dissertation on this, but if you could give us the update.
I'll make this very, very quick. As Mr. Kine said, and as you reiterated, Mr. Supervisor, there were three basic questions that were asked of us at the last public hearing. We have submitted the materials that answered all of them. Hopefully they've answered them satisfactorily and completely enough for the board to make its determination. If you have questions with respect to the submissions, we'd be happy to try to answer them.
Well, there was one major question, and I think myself and Mr. Ullman and Ms. Logan spoke to this, and that was about the property on Grove Street that we thought should be given to the town for town.
I was hoping you'd forget about that one.
No, in fact, I wasn't here. I'm actually going to strengthen it.
Mr. Manuel, and I believe doing so would alleviate a lot of the complaints that the neighbors had. A, reduces the density, B, gives more parkland, it reduces a lot of, I would say the majority of the neighbors' issues will be resolved with this parcel.
And I have spoken with my client. We've examined it thoroughly, and my client is willing to give that property to the town as parkland.
Okay. Great. That is great.
And if it does become a park, I hereby call it first the Ullman Park. I called it first. No,
Ullman Logan.
The only problem,
Ullman Logan Charles?
the only problem I have to remind you to is you have to be dead.
Well, we appreciate that. It was a major concern of this board that that property, that large parcel that goes onto Grove Street become dedicated to the town for municipal purposes, recreation, and general municipal purposes. That's great.
Okay. I also know, I think traffic was a major concern, and there's been a lot of submissions about that. I know Mr. Lang is here on behalf of our planning consultant. I know he's talking to the applicant's traffic consultant, Mr. Collins. If the board has any questions, probably the appropriate time to bring that up. Although I do believe, subject to a traffic light being installed, Mr. Lang is satisfied with the proposal.
And Mr. Collins is satisfied as well. Okay. I mean, from the material that I saw in the second submission, it looked great.
Fine.
I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Okay, very good. Anything else, Council?
No, we do have two draft resolutions if the board is willing to close the public hearing. We do have to
All right,
adopt
we have a
the
motion
secret.
to close the public hearing by
Logan.
Deputy Supervisor Withers, second by Councilwoman Logan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries unanimously. And on the motions, Council?
Yes, the first resolution we prepared is a negative declaration pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act. This is based on Mr. Lang's recommendation, and he concludes, and he asked the board to conclude that there are no significant adverse environmental impacts proposed as a result of the application.
Moved by
Logan.
Councilwoman Logan, seconded by Councilman Ullman. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, carries unanimously.
The next resolution before you is on the main petition. This is a resolution which would approve the change of zone from MR8 to MU1. Since we did have a condition in the county's GML, this will require an override, which means we do need 4 votes. Councilman Withers was out of town, was unavailable at the last public hearing. So he would not be able to vote unless he had reviewed the transcripts from that hearing, which I don't think he's had an opportunity to do. So just so the board is aware, if the intent is to approve the resolution, then we need the remaining 4 votes.
Okay. He can vote on this?
He cannot.
Okay. All right, so moved by
Logan.
Councilwoman Logan, seconded by Councilman
Friedman.
Councilman Friedman. Our clerk, Mr.
Councilman Ullman?
Yes.
Call the roll.
Councilman Friedman?
Yes.
Councilman Logan?
Yes.
Supervisor St. Lawrence?
Yes.
And Withers abstains.
Yes.
Can I just add on one thing?
Yes.
I do want to add on that I spoke to Mr. Jackson right outside the last meeting. And I questioned him about the view, because some of the neighbors complained about the view. And Mr. Jackson assured me, based on the slope, that it's physically impossible for the neighbors to see, someone standing on the second floor window to see into the neighbors. So we did this whole sketch on the
they
pen
could
and
have
paper.
drones, though.
They did it.
They could have drones. They could put balloons up with cameras and...
They've got those remote helicopters with cameras.
Thank you.
And also, it's important to realize that the density has decreased based on what was planned, which could have been, I believe, 3 or 4 bedrooms to smaller units as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you brought up something, so we moved it, and it's done. And you brought up something about, on the last applicant, about the codification, recodification we need to do on the ARB. And so we need to set a date on that of August 15th at 6 o'clock.
Right, we have a
Moved
meeting-
by
a meeting then.
Councilman Ullman, seconded by Councilwoman Logan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilwoman Logan, seconded by Councilman Ullman. I heard that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, carries unanimously. We are adjourned.